If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 41, The Power of House Frigger. Haha, very good. Anderson smiled as he responded to Viserys. To Helbo and the others, his smile felt colder than the harshest winter wind. The underlying message seemed clear: okay, fine. Just wait until it's your turn to die. Anderson stood and said, what a pleasant banquet. I wish Prince Dany a happy birthday. He casually dropped the fork with the lamb chop and began to leave. No need to see him off. Viserys called out, stopping Anderson in his tracks briefly before he continued walking. His fists were clenched, barely containing his anger. Morel and Helbo turned to Viserys in horror. They wanted to get up and see Anderson off, but their legs were weak and they were drenched in sweat. They struggled to stand but quickly sat back down. Just then, Dany descended the stairs, having removed her hair ornaments with the help of her maid. Her hair was braided into thick braids, making her head look like a gourd. Seeing Jill fainted, she hurried over to check on her. Brother, what's wrong with Jill? She's probably not feeling well. Let her go home and rest for a few days, Viserys said, giving Dany's maid a wink. The maid quickly helped Jill up and carried her away. Prince, what should we do now? Helbo asked. Morel and his son looked at him, hoping for a reliable answer. But Viserys didn't answer them. Instead, he looked at Dany and said, Dany, a very powerful person is trying to hurt us. Are you afraid? Their two pairs of purple eyes met, and Dany replied, is he stronger than Robert? Not even close. Then I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anyone as long as I have my brother. Good for you. Only then did Helbo realize that the siblings were accustomed to such threats. You must be hungry. Come and eat, Viserys said, moving his chair to make room for Dany. As Viserys leaned over to Helbo, the man instinctively leaned to the side. Viserys wiped the blood from his hand and placed it on Helbo's shoulder, then said in a joking tone, it's truly a dragon swimming in shallow water being teased by shrimp. Helbo didn't know what to say. When he heard Viserys translate this into Valyrian, he thought it made sense. Bullshit. You're about to die, and you call that being wronged. That's enough. You guys go back first. I'll figure this out, Viserys said, realizing that his plan to use Dany's birthday party to consolidate his connections had failed. Morel and Helbo now wanted nothing to do with him, and those who had hoped to use his connections to reach Falaya would likely scatter after hearing the news. As Anderson had said, the siblings were like dogs without a home. Although their residence was palatial compared to the homes of ordinary people, it wasn't truly theirs. It was unlikely that the Sea Lord would help them, and the three houses had no reason to fight for a lost prince who had been exiled. Now, Viserys had three options. First, run. Leave Bravos with nothing but the soap recipe. But that would be even more dangerous. If Robert didn't kill him, the Friggers would send someone after him. Especially if they went to another free city, where they would be treated like pariahs, their situation would only get worse. Second, hand over the recipe and beg for forgiveness. If Viserys handed over the recipe, he would be begging for mercy. He would also have to hand over his sister. If that were the case, he might as well take his chances and feed himself to the dogs. If neither of the first two options were possible, then there was only one last option left: show enough value to make the three families tear each other apart. And Viserys just happened to have that value. That night, Viserys took Dany and Kyla to the town of Wind Lake, where the pregnant noblewoman Zalane had told him to go. The town was named Wind Lake because it was home to Bravos' largest lake. Even though it was night, Viserys could see the shadow of the largest building in the town. It stood among the other buildings like the peak of a mountain, like the flagship of a fleet, very conspicuous. As they approached, Viserys saw the full picture of the fortress-like building. The walls were carved with ship patterns. This was the home of the House Zalane. Before they got too close, they saw lights flashing on the wall. After a while, a person squeezed out of a half-man-high doorway next to the gate. The man was about the size of a child, barely reaching Viserys' navel, and not as tall as Dany. Upon closer inspection, they saw he was a bald little man. Who are you, and what do you want? The little man asked in a shrill voice. Viserys handed Dany's bracelet to him and said, a lady gave us this bracelet and said that if we showed it, we would be able to see her. The dwarf took the bracelet and examined it, his impatience disappearing. But why are you visiting at this time? The lady is already asleep. Hearing this, Viserys let out a sigh of relief. This dwarf looked like an ordinary servant of the Zalane family, but he recognized the noblewoman's bracelet. It seemed the lady was someone of status, not just a kept woman. It doesn't matter. Please introduce us to her tomorrow morning. We'll be waiting under that tree. Is that okay? The dwarf looked at Viserys and then peered into the carriage on tiptoe. Seeing a little girl and a woman inside, he lowered his guard slightly. Okay, you can wait there. He carefully tucked the bracelet into his bosom as if it were made of fragile glass rather than gold and precious stones. Is there anything else? Yes, said Viserys, taking a letter from his bosom and handing it to him. Give this to the lady when she wakes up. The dwarf glanced at the letter and then tucked it into his bosom as well. Thank you for your hard work, Viserys said, indicating he had no further business. The dwarf nodded and then slipped through the small door. Brother, what's in the letter? Dany asked. Viserys smiled and said, it's a secret for now. I'll tell you the whole story later. After that, Viserys instructed the driver to stop the carriage under the big tree, and the three of them waited quietly inside. Chapter 42, House Zalane. Based on my observation of the noblewoman's complexion that day, she appeared to be a pregnant woman suffering from slow-acting lead poisoning. Combined with the information he'd gathered earlier, Viserys knew that the Zalanes had not had a healthy child in over a decade, a direct cause of their decline. Viserys estimated that the child in the lady's womb was also unlikely to survive. Additionally, there were rumors that the current Sea Lord's health was deteriorating, displaying symptoms typical of severe anemia. Among the three families, only House Frigger showed milder symptoms of lead poisoning. The reason was unclear to Viserys, but he speculated that either the Friggers were aware of the dangers and took precautions, or their regular diet helped expel lead from their bodies. If it was the former, their intentions were sinister; if the latter, they were simply fortunate. Viserys couldn't guarantee that he could cure the lady, but he could offer her hope. If she accepted his help, he wouldn't have to worry about the soap workshop. Dany, go to sleep if you want. I'll keep watch. Kyla, you should sleep too, Viserys said. Lord, I'll keep watch, Kyla offered. I'm not sure about your skills, Viserys replied with a hint of sadness. Kyla, who had always considered herself a bodyguard, started to disagree but realized Viserys was right. Brother, I'm not tired. I'll keep you company, Dany said. Close your eyes and recite the Song of the Moon. You'll fall asleep in no time, Viserys suggested, arranging for the two of them to sleep together, snuggled up close. The custom-made carriage was spacious, with blankets and pillows, allowing them to sleep comfortably. Meanwhile, Helbo, upon leaving, began to technically lay off his employees. Just tell everyone they've all worked hard recently, give them their money, and let them relax for a while. Yes, Lord. Are you going somewhere else? The young accountant asked, meticulously aware of Helbo's financial situation. It was unusual for him to dismiss his staff when the soap workshop was doing well, making this move particularly strange. Me? I also need to take a break. I've been spending most of my time at the Moonpool Theatre lately, Helbo said. By Moonpool Theatre, he actually meant the area around Purple Harbor. Helbo had already converted most of his money into expensive gems, ready to flee any moment if House Frigger made a move. Meanwhile, Morell and his son informed Falia about the confrontation between Viserys and Anderson. However, Falia didn't have a good solution. As a courtesan, she spent her days mingling in the upper circles, but without a solid foundation, they could fall at any time. Though the houses wouldn't act against them on a whim, she sensed something was wrong this time. Falia couldn't blame Viserys for not being calm, and she didn't want him to hand over the soap recipe easily either. She needed the income from the soap just as much as Viserys did. For now, all she could do was take things one step at a time. Lady Falia, why don't we go to the Great Grass Sea together? You're so beautiful, you'll definitely be noticed by Akal, and then you'll become a Khaleesi. Asha suggested, her dark, almond-shaped eyes serious and earnest. Falia smiled and said nothing. Asha's thinking was too naive. Someone like Falia might have some status in Bravos, but elsewhere, she would be an easy target. In places like the Great Grass Sea, she would be eaten alive. Let's wait a little longer. Didn't Viserys say he would find a way? Let's wait a little longer, Falia said, more to herself than to Asha. She could read the swordsmen and merchants around her easily, but Viserys remained an enigma. Some time ago, she had asked Asha to gather information about him. In just 3 months, he seemed to have undergone a massive transformation. Most people believed Viserys had become ruthless, willing to kill without hesitation. But Falia saw that his so-called ruthlessness was different. He spared Helbo, who was relatively weak, but killed Bannergar without mercy, using the terrifying method of tying a rope around his mouth to show off his skills. He even took on the job of being a henchman as a prince, a mentality not easily adjusted. Falia had a feeling that this Beggar King, as others saw him, would be able to turn the tide of this crisis and perhaps even rise higher. With a roar like a titan, Braavos begins a new day. The sound emanates from the Titan of Braavos, one of the 9 wonders of the world. Although the Titan is a little far from Bitterwell, its roar is muted when the siblings are at home. Families like the Zalanes have carefully chosen their location, ensuring the Titan's roar is heard clearly. At this moment, the House Zalane fortress also rings out with bells. The bells are long and short, and very regular. Like a string of instructions, they make the ancient fortress come to life. Dany and Kyla, who had slept in their clothes, woke up quietly. It was as if they remembered that something important was going to happen today. As soon as they opened their eyes, they sat up. Viserys handed them each a damp towel. "Wipe your faces. We should be able to get in soon." Looking out of the carriage window, Viserys saw figures moving on the battlements. They must be House Zalane's servants. The 3 great houses share the military power of Braavos, so it's possible these people are all in the army, Viserys thought to himself. Soon, the gate of the fortress creaked open, as if breathing the first breath of air each day. A woman emerged from behind the gate, the maid who had accompanied the noblewoman to the temple of the Moonsingers the other day. She walked with a straight posture, moving gracefully towards Viserys' carriage. Chapter 43, A Victory Without Bloodshed. The maid introduced herself as Pyrina. She wore a long, pale-colored dress with 3 red patterns on the sleeves, which gave the impression of some kind of status symbol. Pyrina recognized Viserys and his sister at a glance. She only refused to follow Kyla. "It's okay, you can just guard the carriage," she said. With that, the 2 siblings followed her into the fortress. As soon as they entered, Viserys felt as if he had opened the door to a fantasy world. The vibrant colors and exotic flowers made it seem like a painted canvas. The garden was adorned with coral decorations, their bright red hue so intense it was almost blinding. Walking through a long corridor, they passed walls decorated with vivid murals, painted with gold leaf and precious pigments. Servants bustled about everywhere in the fortress, tirelessly running around like worker ants. Pyrina led the siblings through countless turns, and while Viserys was fine, Dany was starting to feel a bit dizzy. After about half an hour, they arrived at a side hall. "The lady is still washing up, so you 2 can wait here for a while," Pyrina said. "No problem," Viserys replied. The siblings observed the so-called side hall, which was spacious enough to hold a ball. It wasn't exactly magnificent, but it was quite stylish. The room featured more than 20 bonsai-sized coral decorations, reflecting the family's fondness for coral. Viserys noticed that Dany seemed a little nervous. She sat upright, as if someone was supervising her. "A little nervous?" he asked casually. Dany shook her head shyly. "It's nothing. You'll get used to it," Viserys reassured her. To him, the difference between those who had seen the world and those who hadn't was just a matter of experience. If the richest man in the world were placed in Viserys' world, he'd be overwhelmed too. Dany hadn't attended any formal social gatherings before, so her nerves were understandable. After another half hour, Pyrina returned. "Gusts, the lady is waiting for you." The siblings got up, and Dany followed Viserys through the hallways until they finally met Lady Methys on a terrace, dressed in luxurious clothes. According to aristocratic custom, visits should be made in the afternoon or evening. Viserys and his sister had come early in the morning, which was rather rude. However, when Methys heard that they had been waiting outside all night, her slight displeasure disappeared. Pyrina arranged for the siblings to sit down. Methys' eyes kept wandering over Dany, as if she had seen something she particularly liked, making Dany feel a little embarrassed. After a few seconds, Methys reluctantly looked away, then turned to Viserys and said, holding up the envelope in his hand, "You told me you had a solution to these problems. I can't say it's a complete solution, but it can be greatly improved. At the same time, the probability of House Zalane having a healthy child will be greatly increased. Methys looked at him seriously, revealing a hint of pressure. But Viserys, who had faced warlords before, remained unfazed. Lady, the problem is with the water you drink. Pyrrhina, standing nearby, looked at him with contempt. This was water from the Sweetwater River, and the nobles of Bravus had been drinking it for hundreds of years without issue. To her, Viserys was simply exaggerating. Tell me, Methys said, his sincere expression prompting Viserys to continue. The Bravus healers like to call illnesses such as dizziness, insomnia, and easily fatigued noblemen's illnesses, but in fact, these are all symptoms of lead poisoning. Lead? Poisoning? Methys repeated in confusion. Pyrrhina, still skeptical, added, Prince, lead is considered a good medicine by many healers. It calms the nerves and helps people sleep. How can it poison people? Viserys didn't intend to mock her. He knew about lead poisoning, a knowledge that stemmed from the understanding of that era. In some historical plays, he thought, the sedative soup often mentioned is made by imperial doctors adding lead. Restless children? Sedative soup. Ladies struggling to sleep? Sedative soup. This has caused numerous cases of lead poisoning. It is a common misconception to talk about toxicity without considering the dosage, Viserys explained. People will die of starvation if they don't eat, but they can also die from overeating. The same principle applies to medicine. He continued, addressing Methys, the symptoms of the Sea Lord's Palace's illness are typical of anemia. Although he has never disclosed his physical condition publicly, I am certain he exhibits all these symptoms. For example, shortness of breath, pale complexion, loss of appetite, and sensitivity to cold. Methys nodded thoughtfully. I haven't seen the Lord for a long time, but I can say that his demeanor varies significantly with the weather. Methys and Pyrrhina exchanged a quick glance, silently acknowledging each other's agreement. Viserys caught the subtle exchange and decided to press his point. Lady, lead poisoning is especially harmful to children. At the mention of children, Methys' expression tightened. The subject was almost taboo within the fortress. Delayed mental development, resulting in a lack of intelligence, Viserys elaborated. Weak muscles, meaning they lack strength. Easily agitated, leading to bad tempers. If Viserys had only mentioned the first two symptoms, Methys might have dismissed him as a charlatan. But the third symptom struck a chord. For the past decade, no child in House Zalane had grown up healthy. They were either slow-witted or frail and prone to anger. This was known only to those serving closely within the household. The healer's remedy for the children's bad tempers had always been calming soup, perpetuating a vicious cycle. Now, Methys believed him. Then what is your solution? Viserys felt a surge of relief, knowing he was more than halfway to his goal. Eat more lemons, fish, and shrimp, and most importantly, stop drinking water from the Long Canal. Instead, drink directly purified water. He paused, then added with a serious tone, Lady Methys, I also have a plan that will make House Zalane the sole master of Bravus. And it will be a victory without bloodshed. Chapter 44, Purple Dragon Egg. In fact, the plan Viserys devised was quite simple, quietly replace the family's lead water pipes with safer alternatives. Over a few decades, House Zalane would see an increase in intelligent and strong children, while the other two houses would naturally decline. According to Viserys' research on Bravus, it was likely the lead pipes that contributed to high-class mobility. The top tier's low fertility forced them to make way for the lower classes. This dynamic prevented the three great families from fully controlling Bravus but also strengthened the city by broadening the talent pool. However, Lady Methys' intuition told her that if all positions were filled by her descendants, her family would become even stronger. She was momentarily entranced by the vision Viserys painted, her eyes shining with excitement. Yet, her high-status acumen quickly brought her back to reality. I understand why you are here, she said. Viserys nodded with a smile, unsurprised. The introduction of soap had already attracted the attention of many Bravasi nobles, including the three great houses. Methys was only slightly surprised that the soap's inventor was Dany's brother and had a hunch that Viserys might seek her out. Soon, Viserys and Methys reached an agreement. He provided the soap recipe, and House Zalane would handle production and sales. His share was reduced from 45% to 10%. Although it was a significant reduction, with the Zalanese influence, soap would be sold throughout the free cities within half a year, and even Westeros and Slavers Bay would soon see its introduction. Methys's husband, already over 50 and due to the family's decline, had to manage the fleet himself and was often away for years. Lady Methys essentially ran House Zalane, giving her considerable influence. Having decided to turn their backs on House Frigger, they resolved to go all the way. The workshop would remain open as a decoy, while a new workshop would produce soap. Their agreement didn't need written documentation. Viserys' value lay in keeping the lead poisoning secret. If he couldn't sustain the profits in 2 or 3 years, his 10% share would be gradually absorbed. This outcome was much better than Viserys had anticipated. If all went well, the soap business would bring him at least 100,000 gold dragons in 2 or 3 years. Dany, observing from the side, witnessed power politics in action for the first time. She also realized that the crisis brought by the uninvited guest Anderson had been effectively neutralized. As the two were about to leave, Viserys asked, "Lady, do you have any dragon eggs in your collection?" Methys glanced at Viserys, trying to gauge his intentions. "I know that if you do, they must be your most precious treasures. I just want Dany to see them. As a Targaryen, she has never seen a dragon egg. This is my failure as a brother." Methys' expression softened at his words. "Of course," she replied, giving a wink to Pyrena. Pyrena nodded and went to fetch the egg. A dragon egg. Dany's eyes widened. As a true Targaryen, she had never seen one in person, only in Viserys' stories and paintings. "Wait here for a moment," Methys said. "The dragon egg will be here shortly." "Thank you, lady," Viserys replied. A moment later, Pyrena returned to the terrace carrying a black wooden box. "Here it is, a real, complete dragon egg!" Viserys exclaimed, his excitement palpable. The last time, he had only seen a fragment of a dragon egg, which had already provided him with 3 assignable points. How many would this complete dragon egg provide? The box was placed on the table with a dull thud. Pyrena's steady handling indicated she was well practiced, which made sense. Methys, as the head of her household, wouldn't have someone clumsy handling such precious items. Pyrena opened the box to reveal a purple dragon egg, its size comparable to an electric kettle. The egg's surface was adorned with a scaly floral pattern and 3 silver streaks running through it like bolts of lightning. Dany stood stunned, the purple dragon egg gleaming like a large gemstone in the morning light. "Can I touch it?" Viserys asked, ready to pretend an accidental touch if necessary. Methys didn't refuse, perhaps due to her fondness for Viserys or affection for Dany. Most likely, it was the latter. "Go ahead," she said. Viserys reached out, his fingers trembling with anticipation as they brushed against the smooth, scaled surface of the dragon egg. "Be careful," Methys cautioned. "Okay," Viserys replied. He carefully lifted the fossilized dragon egg from the box, feeling its cold surface. Pyrena's eyes remained fixed on the egg in his hands, ready to catch it if he dropped it. A complete fossilized dragon egg yields 10.5 assignable points. Holding it for an additional day will earn you an additional 0.5 assignable points. 10 points. Half a point per day. That's the value of a complete fossilized dragon egg, Viserys thought. "Here, touch it," Viserys said, holding the egg out to Dany. Dany cautiously extended her right hand, spreading her thumb and pinky while lightly touching the egg with the tips of her middle 3 fingers. It was as if the egg would shatter with any pressure. She touched it twice, then withdrew her hand. Viserys returned the egg to the box. "Well, today was a worthwhile trip. Please thank the lady for me." Pyrena closed the box and nodded. Viserys decided to keep this matter secret for now, not informing Falia. Morel needed to continue the act, and Falia couldn't stop either. Although the workshop was doomed, Morel and his son would benefit from gaining House Zalane's friendship. Methys would undoubtedly compensate them. Falia, unaware of these sudden developments, would gain more support from House Zalane when the celebration began. However, things were not going well for her. After her break with Viserys, Anderson quickly launched his campaign against her. Chapter 45, Constitution plus 10. After leaving the fortress of House Zalane, Viserys immediately focused on enhancing his constitution with the attributes that had increased by more than 10 points. He signaled to Dany and Kyla to remain silent for the time being. Opening the panel, he saw that his constitution was already at 73.6. Adding 10.5 points would bring it to 84.1, the level of a first-class warrior. Although there was still a gap between him and the humanoid monsters like the Mountain or the tribal chiefs like the Horse Lord who rose to power through sheer force, he was already a rare warrior. Not only could he fully display his swordsmanship and combat skills, but he also had additional bonuses. After all, there's a saying that might makes right. With enough strength, he could perform any trick. Adding all the points to his constitution, he immediately felt a surge of power throughout his body. His muscles twitched continuously, like a swarm of snakes writhing under his skin. His bones cracked, and his head steamed like a kettle. Dany and Kyla had never witnessed such a scene before and couldn't help but worry about Viserys. They wanted to ask him about it, but his earlier request for silence held them back. From his expression, however, it seemed like he was enjoying the experience, with a smile on his lips and a light sweat on his forehead. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was in a sauna. As the two of them watched Viserys' transformation with curiosity, a strange smell suddenly filled the carriage. At first, they searched for the source of the odor, but soon it became so strong that their eyes watered. This can't be shit, can it? Kyla asked, unable to hide her disgust. Why would the gods choose someone who shits in his pants? Both of them covered their noses and mouths, fighting the urge to jump out of the carriage. Soon they were retching. Finally, they arrived home, and both jumped out of the carriage as if escaping. The coachman was about to help them down but saw them running more than 10 meters away from the carriage, panting heavily. Feeling puzzled, he turned around and looked through the curtain. The stench hit him like a punch, leaving his head spinning. What the hell is going on in this carriage? He exclaimed, about to speak but was stopped by Kyla. She warned the coachman not to spread what had happened. As the messenger of the gods, Viserys' embarrassing situation was not something to be shared. After about 10 minutes, Viserys opened his eyes. His senses restored, he jumped so high that he broke through the roof of the carriage. The closed environment and sudden gain of strength made him mistakenly think he had been hit by a tear gas bomb, leading to his uncontrolled leap. Dany and Kyla looked at him in horror. How could a person jump that high? He must be a monster. With the carriage in disarray, they stared at Viserys, who stood there like a statue. After a moment, he realized the unpleasant smell was coming from his own body. Without hesitation, he stripped off his clothes and rushed to the water storage room, moving so fast that his legs left a blur. If someone had measured his speed, they would have found it nearly reaching the limit of human capability. Grabbing a bucket, he poured water over his head, and grey-brown dirt streamed down to form a small river at his feet. Though a faint odor remained, it was quickly dissipating. Dany and Kyla, recovering their senses, followed him with deep concern. According to Dany, if a person stank, it usually meant they were injured, yet she couldn't recall Viserys being hurt. Kyla was equally puzzled, wondering if Viserys had been poisoned. But why was Dany unaffected? When they reached the water room, their doubts were replaced by astonishment. Viserys stood there, his body clean and flawless, resembling a sculpture of a god. The water cascading down his skin gave it a dazzling luster, and his muscles, shifting with each movement, seemed the work of a master artist. Both women were momentarily stunned. For over a decade, Kyla had known only training and combat, but now she felt something within her stir. If a god stood before her, this is what it would look like, she thought, rendered speechless. At that moment, the maid discovered the commotion and hurried to the water room. Upon seeing Viserys' body, her heart raced, her breathing quickened, and she felt dizzy as if she had taken some potent elixir. Don't just look, bring me some clothes, Viserys instructed. The maid, realizing her embarrassment, turned away, her face flushed from her cheeks to her ears. Brother, Dany said softly, as if afraid of startling him. I'm fine. Don't tell anyone about what happened today, he replied. The two women nodded. After thoroughly washing with soap, Viserys headed to the lawn where he and his sister usually practiced martial arts. His constitution had now reached 84, allowing him to earn 0.23 assignable points daily. This meant that by the 10th day celebration in a month, his constitution would surpass 90. If I had such a reaction breaking through 80, what will happen when I reach 90? What if it reaches 100? If this continues, as long as I live long enough, I'll probably be as strong as Captain America, if not stronger. I could jump off a 10-story building and walk away with just a pat on the back, he mused, envisioning the possibilities. Kyla, attack me, Viserys commanded, holding a two-handed sword effortlessly in one hand as he performed a casual sword dance. The weapon's formidable power was evident in the whirring sound it made slicing through the air. Kyla realized that he must have become even stronger. Could this be a gift from the gods? Drawing her sword, Kyla engaged Viserys in combat. The first blow made her arms go numb, a sensation familiar from dueling strong swordsmen. However, the second blow disrupted her balance, shocking her. As an assassin, her greatest strength was her agility. By the third blow, she was left speechless. Viserys had knocked the sword from her hand. As the weakest of the three, Dany couldn't discern much from the fight, but she knew her brother had grown even stronger. Viserys casually plunged his sword into the ground, where it sank halfway in. Despite having fought Kyla, he had used only 30% of his strength. He realized his current strength allowed him to wield a two-handed sword as a one-handed sword. Moreover, his left hand had become much more flexible, prompting him to consider dual wielding. With such power, he held an extra card in his hand. If his conflict with Anderson escalated uncontrollably, he could escape with Dany, protecting her in any free city. Viserys estimated that House Frigger would make their move in 2 days at most. Fortunately, with House Zalane backing him, his residence was well guarded, thanks to Methys. Less than 3 days after Dany's birthday party, Ranch hurriedly approached him, looking very anxious. Even his usually well-ironed, neat clothes seemed a bit messy. Chapter 46, Falia's Troubles. Prince Viserys, can you tell me what happened between you and Anderson on the day of Lady Dany's birthday party? Ranch asked anxiously. Hey? Didn't Morell tell you? Viserys replied. No, we can't get in touch with them at all. I snuck out from Lady Falia, Ranch admitted, his usual grace replaced with evident worry. All right, here's the situation, Viserys began, still a bit surprised by how quickly House Frigger had acted. The day he returned from Methys, he learned that workers in the workshop had been attacked. By the next day, more than half of them were injured, forcing Morell's workshop to shut down. This abrupt halt derailed Falia and Viserys' original plan. Their methods were beyond Viserys' expectations. Coming from a world of law and order, he had assumed that House Frigger would apply economic pressure, perhaps cutting off raw materials like whale oil. He hadn't expected them to target the workers directly. Many citizens of Bravos were already on the brink of starvation, relying on their daily labor to survive. Now, injured and unable to work, their situation was dire. The once bustling workshop had fallen eerily silent, leaving Morell and his son devastated. Falia, too, was suffering under Anderson's manipulation. She was constantly harassed, unable to meet with anyone, and effectively in semi-house arrest. Her protectors had mostly scattered. A few tried to seek justice for their Lady Moonshadow, but they quickly disappeared, as if swallowed by the city itself. The immense pressure made Falia feel genuine fear for the first time. She had believed she could navigate the elite circles of Bravos, but now she saw the true power wielded by her enemies and felt powerless. Considering Viserys' status, House Frigger wouldn't directly harm him, so they sent Ranch to make contact. As Ranch listened to the details from Viserys, his eyes grew hollow. His body weakened, as if the weight of the news had drained the strength from his bones. After a long pause, Ranch turned to Viserys and said, "You, how could you, that's House Frigger." He knew deep down that Viserys couldn't be blamed for this. Without the workshop, Falia would still face failure. The only difference was that instead of a slow demise, it was a sudden death. If things continued like this, Falia would sooner or later become Anderson's plaything, or even worse, a pawn of House Frigger. Ranch understood that Viserys had little choice in cooperating with House Frigger. Even if Viserys had chosen to cooperate, it would have meant betraying his allies. Falia's fate would have remained the same, only delayed. "Lady Falia, I am incompetent," Ranch muttered in despair, sliding off his chair and falling to his knees. "Do you think crying and screaming will stop House Frigger?" Viserys said, grabbing Ranch's shoulder and pulling him up. "Can you ride a horse? Let's go find Falia together. Kyla, take care of Dany," he instructed. With that, Viserys and Ranch left swiftly. The situation on Falia's side had deteriorated significantly. To confine her, Anderson brought over a dozen family guards disguised as his entourage and stationed them outside. No one could see Falia, and sending a message out was nearly impossible. The flower boat was in disarray. Delicate glass vases lay shattered on the floor, creating sharp obstacles. The furnishings were overturned, and an incense burner had been knocked over, releasing dust into the air. Falia's maid, Asha, was on the floor, clutching her stomach and trying to crawl towards her mistress. Anderson, losing patience, had stepped on Asha's hand. Even though his house had given him strict instructions not to use force, mindful of their reputation. Despite being a form of prostitution, the courtesan profession was highly respected in Braavos, which was famous for it. Ruining the reputation of the courtesans would encourage others to do the same, harming the courtesan economy that brought significant revenue to Braavos. Every decade or so, some fool would try to force himself on a courtesan, but they were always executed by the three great houses. This reinforced the importance of courtesan purity, not noble, but expensive. It was not in the interests of the three great houses to take the courtesans without paying a suitable price. Of course, it was possible to bypass this, provided one could conquer these highly trained women, who had seen countless men. But this was something the houses guarded jealously. Lord Anderson, she is only a servant girl. Please don't hurt her, Falia pleaded, her voice trembling with anxiety. Asha, only a year or two younger than Falia, had grown up alongside her, and their bond was deep. Seeing Asha in pain made Falia desperate. Oh? Then please, Lady Moonshadow, take my advice. Give me your loyalty, and I will cherish it. I promise you the protection of House Frigger, Anderson replied, making his intentions clear. He was going to take advantage of her. Asha cried out in pain as Anderson increased the pressure on her hand. Falia closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. That's it. After today, I'll take Asha to another free city, she was resigning herself to her fate. She gently pulled down her veil, revealing a face that seemed sculpted by the gods. Anderson's eyes burned with lust as he finally saw the object of his desire. His thoughts raced. Next is Dany. If I can have both of them, I'll be more powerful than the Lord. Suddenly, a shout came from outside. Lady Moonshadow. I'm here to keep our appointment. It was Viserys' voice. Falia's hand, which was about to undo the button on her dress, froze. He's here. But can he get on the boat with Anderson's men all around? From the shore, Viserys called out again, Lady Falia. I'm coming aboard. Almost instinctively, Falia tugged at the rope beside her, causing a silver bell on the flower boat to ring out clearly. This signal meant Viserys was coming for an appointment, not to assassinate her. Anderson glared at Falia, then looked out to see Viserys fighting the guards he had stationed. He sneered, confident his guards, the best of the family, could handle a 16-year-old boy. But before Anderson could finish his thought, he saw his men being easily overpowered. Viserys was a whirlwind, tossing guards aside and even kicking some into the lake. The elite guards of House Frigger were like papier-mâché dolls, torn to pieces by Viserys' onslaught. With a final look at Anderson, Viserys flashed a grin, revealing his dazzling white teeth, and leapt into the lake with a splash. Chapter 47, Hard to Get. From the shore to Falia's boat, it was only about 300 meters. Anderson estimated that Viserys would need at least 3 or 4 minutes to swim the distance. He decided to use this time to destroy Falia. Ignoring the command not to use force, he rushed into the cabin, knowing that failing this task would likely ruin his chances of inheriting his house. Falia, watching from the window, saw Viserys jump into the lake and disappear beneath the surface. She grew worried, thinking he might have gotten tangled in water plants. As her anxiety peaked, Anderson burst into the room, his eyes full of malice and desire. Asha tried to stop him, but he kicked her aside effortlessly. Prince Anderson, what are you doing? Ah! Falia cried out as he pushed her hard, causing her to fall backward. Her brown blonde hair flew out, and her plump, snow-white breasts rose and fell with her rapid breathing. Anderson! Do you know what you're doing? Your house will get into trouble because of this. She shouted, trying to reason with him. But Anderson paid no attention. He reached out to grab her breasts, and though she tried to shield herself, he forced her hands away with brute strength. Tearing off her outer garment, he revealed her breathtaking curves. No wonder she's Lady Moonshadow, Anderson thought, willing to risk everything for such a beautiful woman. Anderson! Ah! Falia struggled desperately, but he was much heavier and stronger. Her desperate resistance only fueled his animalistic desire. Asha, still recovering from the pain, could only watch helplessly. Just as Anderson was about to make his next move, he suddenly felt a wet, iron claw-like hand clamp around his neck. He was lifted off the ground and thrown hard onto the floor. A silver light appeared before Falia, a scene she would remember for the rest of her life. Viserys pressed Anderson to the ground and whispered in his ear, "Tell me. Why are you targeting the workshop? Let me go." Anderson shouted angrily, confident that no one would dare hurt him. However, his arrogance quickly turned to regret as he heard a sharp crack and felt searing pain in his shoulder. The intense agony left half of his body numb. Ah! Anderson screamed, nearly tearing his throat. Are you going to talk? Viserys demanded. You wouldn't dare kill me. Another crack echoed through the room, the pain so intense that Anderson almost passed out. But the next second, Viserys woke him up by pouring water on his face. He then sat on Anderson's back, holding his legs and bending them backward. Anderson felt a sharp pain in his back, as if it were about to break. Still not talking? If you don't talk, I'll break your spine. You'll be bedridden for the rest of your life. And once your spine is broken, your thing will never stand up again. Think about it. If you're a cripple, will Lord Frigger still give you his house? The thought of being bedridden for life filled Anderson with dread. What house? What mission? None of it mattered if he could keep his limbs and live in comfort. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Anderson finally surrendered, revealing Frigger's plan to Viserys. After being helped up, Anderson noticed something wrong with his arm. He couldn't move it. My hand! My hand! He cried out. Viserys grabbed his left hand, twisted it, and then pushed it back into place. Another wave of pain surged through him, but Anderson found that he could move his hand again. This is witchcraft, he gasped, realizing that the young man before him was far more terrifying than he had imagined. To save his other arm, Anderson revealed everything about the House Frigger's plan. Each of the three families had their own courtesan. The current Sea Lord's family, House Targaryen, supported the poetess Tillysia. However, the Targaryens already held the position of Sea Lord, so their support for Tillysia was moderate. The main competition was between the Frigger and Zalane houses. House Zalane, which supported Falia, was not very competitive due to their gradual decline. The Nightingale, Gortave, who had considerable support, was relatively active. From targeting Morel's workshop to setting up Falia with Anderson, House Frigger had been relentless. However, Viserys' invention of the soap had given Falia a chance to turn the tables. House Frigger then gave Anderson greater support to use an out-of-the-box strategy to deal with Falia, clearing the way for the Nightingale to win the beauty pageant. After Morel's workshop was shut down, Falia's chances of winning seemed slim. However, by sending a batch of soap to the Moonsinger's temple, she had gained a reputation for purity. Despite the uncertain future, House Frigger sent Anderson to act as a double insurance. I'm asking you, was it you who had Dangler lend me money in the first place, trying to exploit me and then rob my sister? Viserys demanded, his voice sharp with anger. Falia, nearly recovered from her illness, understood as she listened to Anderson's confession. No wonder Viserys had been so agitated when she mentioned Dany. It was all connected to this betrayal. She looked at Viserys, who seemed ready to devour Anderson alive, and recalled the events of that day. Anderson, accepting his fate, closed his eyes and nodded. However, instead of becoming angrier, Viserys let out a piercing laugh. Ha ha ha! He patted Anderson on the shoulder 3 times. You have a lot of ideas. I'll give you a piece of advice: find a way, by any means necessary, to become the heir to House Frigger. Otherwise, I won't feel any sense of accomplishment when I kill you later. Viserys said this to sow discord within House Frigger. He had just demonstrated his extraordinary strength, and the fact that he was only a teenager made him even more terrifying. In Braavos, a city renowned for its assassins, Anderson would need to fortify his defenses and secure the protection of a house head to stay alive. Otherwise, soon, Viserys would come for his head. As Viserys contemplated what to do with Anderson, a threatening warning suddenly came from outside. Listen, assassins inside. Do not harm Prince Anderson, or you will be at war with Braavos. At war with the Sea Lord's palace. You will be punished by death. My ship is surrounded. Falia exclaimed, looking out the window. She saw at least 6 or 7 ships and dozens of guards outside, all wearing blue cloaks, the Sea Lord's guards. The leader, a young man with brown hair, held a bow and arrow, confident he could kill the assassin with a single shot if he showed his head. Chapter 48, I Swim Fast. As the 10-day festival approached, the security burden in Braavos steadily increased. The Sea Lord dispatched part of his own guard to reinforce the city's security forces, appointing Josian as the captain. Josian, a disciple of Caro Valentin, the first sword of Braavos, was responsible for securing the area. Besides his official duty, he had another role, an admirer of Thalia. Josian was acutely aware of Thalia's recent troubles. She was unable to speak, and no one could reach her. For 3 days, Anderson had visited Thalia's ship almost daily, causing Josian immense anxiety. He longed to keep a constant watch on her ship, but Anderson's power deterred him from acting. These days, sleep eluded him. Thankfully, no unusual sounds came from Thalia's ship, otherwise, his heart would have shattered. When Josian heard an assassin had boarded Thalia's ship, his initial reaction was not worry but elation. It was finally an opportunity to see how Thalia was doing. He hoped to catch a glimpse of her and even entertained the fleeting thought of eliminating both the assassin and Anderson. However, he quickly dismissed this notion, fearing the repercussions for himself and his teacher. "People inside! Come out! If you don't come out, we're going to board the ship," he commanded. Soon, 2 men emerged. One was short, with black hair and brown eyes, dressed in disheveled white clothes. It was Anderson, whom Josian had mentally killed 1,000 times. The other man, with silver hair, purple eyes, and striking features, seemed vaguely familiar but unrecognizable to Josian. "My lord, I am here to keep an appointment, not to assassinate anyone." "Lady Moonshadow can be my witness," Viserys said, smiling while keeping one hand on Anderson's shoulder, ready to use him as a human shield. A gentle voice then came from inside the boat. "Is this Lord Josian?" "This is Lord Viserys. He is indeed here to keep an appointment." If Viserys hadn't killed Anderson's guards, Josian might have believed him. Seeing that Viserys was still wet, Josian declared, "Lady Thalia, don't worry, I'll protect you." His tone was so earnest that one might believe he would rush to become Thalia's human shield if necessary. "You said you were here for the appointment. Why aren't you on the boat?" "Because I can swim fast." Josian was puzzled. "I really came for the appointment. You can also ask Lord Anderson." Anderson's mouth went dry, and he opened it to speak but found his throat tight. Cough cough, that's true. He did come for the appointment. Maybe my escort misunderstood. However, Josian still wouldn't relent. "Let go of Lord Anderson." "Lord Anderson, it seems this lord thinks I'm holding you hostage," Viserys said, slapping Anderson on the butt and squeezing it hard before stepping back a few steps. Men know best how to please men, and of course, they also know how to disgust men. "Don't talk nonsense, and I won't either," Viserys whispered in warning. Anderson felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured into his stomach, his internal organs tangled together, but he couldn't let it show. At the same time, he felt a strong sense of humiliation. He didn't understand how the person he had so easily manipulated had suddenly become a threat to him. Now Viserys had the upper hand, and if word got out, it would be bad for the house. Whether for his own reputation or that of the house, he had to admit he had failed. "Josian, put away your arrows. Viserys is my guest," Anderson said. "Viserys. I remember now, he is the Prince of Westeros. I must have been mistaken." Although all the signs indicate that the situation is not normal, since Anderson has spoken, he has no choice but to believe them. "Oh, is it Lord Josian, right? Lord Anderson is about to leave, you can see him off." "Okay." Josian subconsciously responded and told his men to row the boat. When his boat was about to reach Thalia's flower boat, Josian extended his hand and gently made a buffer, worried that his boat would damage Thalia's. After the boat had stopped, his hand still wouldn't leave, as if it was stuck to the boat. Anderson got off the boat, and only after he was seated did Josian let his hand leave the flower boat, first the palm, then the fingers, until the longest middle finger reluctantly brushed the bottom of the boat. "Lord Anderson, be careful," Viserys waved at him, and Anderson forced a smile. Josian was truly confused. He had never seen anything like this before. Even after his boat had left a long way, he kept turning his head to look back. But Viserys, still standing on the boat, kept smiling and waving at Anderson from afar. Viserys did not enter the boat until they were about to land. "Lord Anderson, are you all right?" Anderson did not respond but left on his own. It was clear this matter was more complicated than it seemed, yet it was beyond Josian's ability to interfere, so he had to let it go. Back on the boat, Thalia was applying medicine to Ash's hand. Ash's slender fingers were swollen like radishes, her black almond-shaped eyes filled with tears, whether from pain or feeling wronged, it was hard to tell. The 2 women looked like bullied kittens, snuggling together and tending to their wounds. Let me take a look, Viserys said. Asha had witnessed Viserys' violent rescue and was deeply affected. A part of her heart that had always been introspective was now stirred. Though Viserys had offered to help, he was Phalia's guest, and despite their deep relationship, their statuses differed. She glanced at Phalia and, after receiving her consent, extended her hand to Viserys. Asha felt her palms burning with pain, but when Viserys' cool palm touched hers, the pain eased. He focused on her middle, ring, and little fingers, which were swollen and made his palm look a bit fatter. Somehow, Asha hoped Viserys would notice her other hand, slender and white, rivaling Phalia's. Viserys gently lifted Asha's middle finger and asked, "Does it hurt?" Asha shook her head. Next, he touched her ring finger. As soon as he did, a layer of fine sweat appeared on Asha's forehead. "Oh no, it might be a broken bone." "Broken bone?" Asha whispered, as if it were a serious matter. Viserys looked around but saw no suitable material for a splint. Thinking quickly, he pulled out a few Bravasi iron coins from his pocket. These square coins, with their sharp edges, could be used as concealed weapons. Since improving his constitution and increasing his strength, he always carried some. He tore a strip of cloth from his clothing, wrapped the coin in it, and then placed Asha's other hand on his shoulder. "It might hurt a little, so bear with it." Viserys pulled hard, and Asha immediately turned pale but didn't cry out. Her fingers were connected, and the immense pain made her lose balance, falling into Viserys' arms. The maiden's scent filled his nostrils, and he felt her body's elasticity, causing him to become momentarily distracted. "Take a deep breath," he instructed, placing his hand on Asha's shoulder to comfort her and calm himself. However, Viserys did not see that Phalia, sitting across the table, looked on with envy. She noticed that the young man before her seemed to have undergone some changes, making it hard to resist wanting to get close to him. Before she could be noticed, Phalia suddenly snapped out of it and tried to expel the thought from her mind. But it was like trying to drive away smoke with a stick. Futile. Chapter 49, Swordsmanship Competition. After briefly treating Asha's injuries, Viserys began to talk to Phalia about the workshop. He explained everything that had transpired and also mentioned Dany, making Phalia feel like they were now in the same boat. Despite the dire situation, Phalia felt safer than ever. Her sense of security wasn't unfounded. Viserys shared some great news. "The workshop is gone, but the production of Moon Shadow soaps will continue. Don't worry about how it will be produced. All orders will be delivered on time after a month. But you mustn't show any signs of abnormality. We still need to keep House Frigger people in the dark." Phalia knew it must have been very difficult for Viserys to accomplish this, but since he didn't want to elaborate, she didn't press him. She had been taught since childhood that what you cannot hold in your hands is not real. But if she couldn't trust the man who had defeated an entire guard unit to save her, who could she trust? Viserys had been talking since they arrived, and now that he was finished, the cabin fell silent. "I heard from Morel that you are going to participate in the tournament?" Phalia asked. "Yes. Is it for the Valyrian steel sword?" "No, I have other considerations." "Do you have to participate?" Phalia seemed to be trying to persuade him. "I have to participate," Viserys said calmly but firmly. "Generally, the participants in the tournament are the swordsmen of the three great houses or sellswords," Phalia began to explain. "In fact, the tournament is also a way for the three great houses to resolve conflicts and grievances without bloodshed among the participating swordsmen, so..." Phalia was referring to the incident with Anderson, implying that if Viserys insisted on participating, he would definitely be targeted. "Thank you for your concern. I have anticipated this situation," Viserys replied with a confident smile. His master-level swordsmanship and over 90 constitution gave him confidence. Those with better swordsmanship were not as physically fit due to age, and those with better physical fitness, like the mountain or a horse lord, were rare. Phalia considered this and realized it was true. The young man before her had just defeated a guard unit by himself. It seemed no one could persuade him otherwise. If that's the case, then you must be careful. It is said that House Frigger is determined to win the championship of the celebration tournament. "Thank you, Lady Moonshadow, for your reminder." Hearing Viserys call her Moonshadow made Phalia a bit dissatisfied, but she quickly composed herself and continued, "Because of recent events, you are the only one participating in the poetry competition in my name." Phalia's flower-protecting swordsmen had all fled, and those who sought only to play a few songs and indulge in pleasures had long since disappeared. They wouldn't dare participate in the poetry competition under Falaya's name, fearing the wrath of House Frigger, which would jeopardize Falaya's chances of winning the beauty pageant. Without a propaganda campaign, she would be at a great disadvantage. Don't worry, I'm quite accomplished in poetry and music, Viserys reassured. Falaya shook her head. No, that's not what I meant. I meant that you can't do two things at once. I hope you can focus on the competition. Asha, standing nearby, shared similar concerns. On one side was Falaya, whom she had grown up with and held deep feelings for. On the other was Viserys, who made her heart flutter. It was really hard to choose. Viserys didn't know how to comfort her. He had at least 100 classics in his head, covering a wide range of themes and styles, including pop songs. While there was no need to perform them live, it was a good opportunity to gauge the market. As a courtesan, Falaya would be very familiar with this. Seeing Viserys still interested in the poetry competition, Falaya didn't protest but patiently answered his questions. The upper class in Bravos always prefers soothing and elegant music, while the lower class enjoys something more cheerful. In fact, I find that the so-called upper class isn't genuinely interested in elegant music, but they have to pretend they like it. Viserys nodded, understanding. This was a common issue among the wealthy. In theory, the judges were all Braavosi nobles, but they also had to consider the preferences of the lower classes. If the winning piece wasn't conducive to singing, it would go against the festival's original intention. So, Viserys needed to choose music that appealed to both refined and common tastes. This meant excluding some highly artistic classics in favor of timeless old songs. Just as Falaya and Viserys were discussing Braavo's past works, Ranch's voice called from outside. Lady Falaya, are you, all right? Ranch had set out with Viserys, but due to restrictions on carriages imposed by Anderson, they had to continue on foot after landing. Ranch felt like he was accompanying a monster. Viserys, despite having only 2 legs, ran faster than a horse. He could only watch as Viserys sped off into the distance, shouting at him not to rush. When Ranch arrived, all of Anderson's guards had retreated, leaving him feeling uneasy. Did Anderson succeed, he wondered, his heart sinking. Already out of breath, the news of an assassin chilled him to the core. However, hearing Falaya's voice brought him a sigh of relief. Viserys, dressed in white and still wet, emerged from the cabin. Ranch, don't worry. Lady Moonshadow is fine. Please take me there. He swam here. Ranch marveled. At House Frigger Fortress, in the flower and bird garden, Tormo, the head of the family, sat in a small pavilion sipping sweet wine. The current Sea Lord had established a beast garden in the Sea Lord's palace, while Tormo had created a bird garden for himself. This forest covered several acres, with bird cages of various colors hanging from the trees. The bird cages housed birds with colorful feathers and beautiful songs. Despite the few white hairs on the sides of his head, Tormo's spirit was strong, and his grey eyes seemed capable of seeing through people's hearts. A guard with a black scarf brought Anderson to him. As Tormo's second son, Anderson was not highly regarded, and his recent failure left his future uncertain. Anderson looked at his father's back, waiting for him to turn around, but Tormo remained facing away. This made Anderson's heart even more uneasy. Chapter 50, Making the Most of Things. After a while, Tormo still showed no intention of speaking, and Anderson dared not move for fear of displeasing his father. Suddenly, the masked guard brought in a young man who resembled Anderson somewhat. Judging by his age, he was 2 years younger than Anderson, his younger brother, Tarth. The 2 brothers exchanged glances, devoid of affection. Father, we sent 12 swordsmen to join the sellswords, and 7 of them have returned. I have recorded their characteristics so that you can choose the ones you want for our house. Tormo replied indifferently, still not turning around. The 2 brothers stood by, waiting. After a while, a slightly older man entered. He was the eldest brother, Vitus, looking to be about 35 or 36, and appeared very shrewd. He glanced at his younger brothers with the same emotionless expression. Father. Tormo finally turned around and looked at his 3 sons. Look at the birds in the cage, he said, making Anderson tense up. His other 2 brothers also looked serious. They quickly observed the various birds as their father had instructed. Look at the bird in that cage. It's from the woods of Sothorios. Look at its feathers. Aren't they beautiful? Following Tormo's finger, the 3 brothers saw a bird with emerald green feathers and bright yellow wings. Its large beak looked a bit out of place, but the feathers were stunning. Now, look at the small white cage. It has a beautiful voice. They saw another small cage containing a drab-looking bird with an exceptionally beautiful voice, reminiscent of the tremolo in a violin. You may not think that all the birds in my garden are beautiful, but each has its own strengths. Some may not look good, but they have a beautiful voice. Some may not have a beautiful voice, but they have beautiful feathers. Tormo looked at each of his sons in turn, finally stopping at Anderson. You, tell me, what are you good at? Father. Anderson's lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. The only thing you're good at is playing with women. I thought you could at least handle that, but now you can't even do that well. Tell me, are you worthy to be in the same yard as my birds? As he listened to Tormo, Anderson's face turned red and white in humiliation. But father, what about Viserys? What about Viserys? A lost dog is the reason for your failure. Hearing his father's reproach, Anderson pinched his index finger with the nail of his thumb, trying hard not to lose his temper. Since you can't do anything right, then pour the wine for me and your brothers. Tormo pointed at Tarth and Vitus with his chin. Come on, sit over here. This move was almost telling Anderson that he was even further from the inheritance, though Tormo didn't say it explicitly, leaving a sliver of hope. Anderson poured the sweet wine for his father and brothers, the blood on his index finger inevitably touching the wine glass, but the three ignored it as if they hadn't seen it. Father, our spy in House Zalane reported that Viserys visited Methys a few days ago, Vitus said. Father, the Beggar King must be using Zalane to fight against us. Anderson spoke excitedly, but received a disgusted look from Tormo. You are a servant who pours wine. Is a servant allowed to interrupt? I'm sorry, father. Anderson quickly lowered his head and stepped back, his molars clenched, eyes flashing with anger, and his body trembling slightly. With Tormo's permission, Vitus continued, according to my investigation, it seems unlikely that House Zalane has acquired whale oil and is prepared to fight us. Tormo nodded, agreeing with his eldest son. Their spies had long since discovered the ingredients for the soap. However, the recipe was still unclear, and their people were experimenting. What they didn't know was that whale oil was not necessarily needed to make soap. Lard, sheep fat, cow fat, and even to minimize a disaster, Viserys hadn't told Methys about the kind of animal. But sooner or later, someone would discover that the fat of any animal could also be used to make soap. In Tormo's opinion, House Zalane would fall sooner or later. For nearly 20 years, no healthy offspring had reached adulthood, and now, although they were making a last-ditch effort, Tormo believed they would pray to him for a dignified end. From then on, they would withdraw from the ranks of the three great families. Therefore, the possibility of them fighting against him was low. The lack of whale oil acquisition further confirmed his conjecture. As for Viserys, Tormo had not yet taken him seriously, believing that Viserys was still alive today purely because his second son was too useless. In addition, according to reports from our contacts close to the Sea Lord, the topics for the song competition are likely these, Vitus said, taking a note from his breast pocket and handing it to Tormo. Tormo glanced at it and said, Yes, send this to the Nightingale. Yes, father. Tormo then turned to his youngest son. Since some people can't handle Viserys, I'll leave it to you. Tarth sat up straight, like a soldier awaiting orders. I remember he also participated in the tournament, right? Yes, father. Well, you can arrange it. Since he dared to be an enemy of House Frigger, he must pay the price. Understood. Tormo was determined to become the next Sea Lord. In his opinion, Bravus would one day belong to House Frigger. The 10-day festival was of great significance to Bravus. If Viserys died before the festival, it would probably not affect the event but would certainly be talked about. With the festival less than a month away, he decided to let Viserys be for now. Viserys had not left the house for some time. Almost everyone knew that he and House Frigger seemed to be in conflict. As a result, the house was quiet, with only 2 maids, a stable boy, the siblings, and Kyla remaining. Even Helbo had not been seen for a long time. Viserys did not mind, he had been busy with other things. In front of him was a basin of water with a tiny tadpole in it, like a speck of ink. He was attempting to invade the tadpole's consciousness and control it. This would be his first attempt at warging. Chapter 51, Seagull. I, Viserys, came to this world with 3 goals, ride a dragon, and ride a dragon. But currently, I don't even have a dragon egg, and the magic tidal wave is still a few years away. Becoming a skin changer is a very good alternative. The Stark children can control dire wolves and roam the wilderness. Some of the wildlings beyond the wall also possess this talent. Imagine invading the body of an eagle and feeling the power of the wind firsthand. In this era, such a talent is invaluable for a general. It's like having constant battlefield awareness, eliminating the fog of war. This is mastery at its finest. But I can't yet invade an eagle, so I have to start with a tadpole. The lower the intelligence and the less developed the brain, the easier the animal is to invade. So, I chose the tadpole. It probably doesn't even have a developed brain, just a few nerves. Master, you have to imagine that you have entered the target's consciousness. Imagination is very important. Staring at the tadpole in the basin, I conjured up the experience Kyla had described. I imagined the sound of water flowing in my ears and that I had entered the basin. Suddenly, my eyes rolled back, and I slumped to the ground. The next moment, I realized my vision had become extremely poor. There was only faint light and shadow in front of me, and a slight sound of water flowing around me. There was no sound at all when I moved through the water. I did it. I was excited to realize I had entered the body of the tadpole. I wiggled my tail and swam around the basin. I barely felt the basin walls when I touched them, indicating the tadpole's nervous system was not well developed. After the initial excitement, the limited vision and poor sensory feedback became boring and unsettling. To return to my body, I had to imagine it. I pictured myself sitting on the sofa. Soon, my eyes returned to normal, and I moved my body Viserys again. I opened my panel. My constitution was now almost 87.9. In 10 days or so, I would reach 90, giving me a better chance of winning the tournament. What should I name the sword if I win it? I wondered. Lost in thought for a moment, Viserys continued to review his other attributes. Spirit, 100. Health, 77. Magic, 27.9. Thanks to his continuous chanting of the Moonsinger's songs, Viserys' spirit was the first attribute to reach 100. It seemed to be the upper limit, as if restricted by something invisible. He had no idea what it was. His magic value had also increased significantly, from a dozen points initially to nearly 30 now. The Moonsinger's songs were indeed useful. He had planned to visit the Moonsinger's temple for higher level chants or the temple of the Lord of Light for something like a Song of Fire, but various events had prevented him from doing so. He'd have to find another time. For now, he knew the value of these things and didn't need to worry. It seems that magic is consumed during warging. So, it costs magic as well, Viserys mused, glancing at his stats. Sure enough, a new skill had appeared. Skin Changer, Beginner, 12/100. He smirked, then looked at his other skills and started reallocating points. He hadn't improved his swordsmanship recently, so his other skills had naturally gained a lot of proficiency. After nearly 10 minutes of clicking, Viserys had accumulated more than 600 points of general proficiency. Skin Changer, Proficient, 142/1000. As his Skin Changer skill improved, Viserys felt a deeper understanding of consciousness invasion. A small tadpole was no longer sufficient for him. He got up and walked to the small nest behind the door, where a wounded seagull that had nearly recovered was resting. He had found it at the pier, its leg broken by a child's stone. He had brought it back, nursed it, and developed a bond with it. As mentioned in the original tales, the ease of consciousness invasion is related to the closeness between humans and animals. Initially, the seagull, nicknamed Fries, had been resistant to Viserys. It was a free seagull, resistant to being tamed. However, food and shelter had softened its stance. Now, as soon as Viserys approached, the seagull nuzzled its head close to him, allowing him to stroke it. "Little seagull, I'm coming in." Viserys soon entered the seagull's body his consciousness did. Viserys looked at his own fallen body and thought, "Damn, I'm so handsome. A beautiful face in the prime of life." After admiring himself, he tried to take a few steps around the room. Because of his smaller size, the room now seemed much larger, transforming from a standard bedroom into a small theater. He instinctively spread his wings, feeling the power of the wind lift him. His body soared into the air, the white figure hovering in the room. What had once felt spacious now seemed a bit cramped from this new perspective. Viserys, now in the seagull's body, landed safely on the windowsill and looked out at the sky. It was clear and blue, with white clouds floating by and a few birds flying overhead. The sight made him feel happy and relaxed. The sky. I'm coming. He flapped his wings, jumped forward, and his body drew a white arc in mid-air, then shot straight up into the sky. Wow, take off! He squawked, feeling exhilarated. It was like the first time Tony Stark put on the Mark I suit. The power to fly into the sky and dive to the ground made him feel invincible. After ascending a few hundred meters, Viserys looked down and saw Braavos from a bird's-eye view for the first time. Though it was called the City of 1,000 Islands, most were just small rocks and mounds. The city was primarily composed of 4 larger islands. He saw the long canal that ran through Braavos and the White Temple of the Moonsingers. He continued to fly, passing the 3 great houses, the Blue Sea Lord's Palace, and the Red Rock Temple of the Lord of Light. The sights flashed by beneath him. Aegon the Conqueror, is this what you saw? He murmured, flying towards the Titan of Braavos. A journey that would normally take nearly 2 hours by carriage or boat took him less than 20 minutes. He flew straight up to the top of the giant statue. The grey-green statue's face was blurred, likely due to its immense height and lack of maintenance. Viserys soon arrived at the top, where a few seagulls were cooing as if conversing. One of the seagulls noticed him and moved closer. This seagull is so annoying, Viserys thought. Wait, could it be that I am a female seagull? He glanced down at the seagull, then flapped his wings and flew away. However, the seagull seemed particularly fond of him and followed closely behind. Chapter 52, Viserys in the Basin. As the 10-day celebration approached, Braavos grew busier with each passing day. Coachmen and boatmen worked tirelessly from morning to night, eating, drinking, defecating, and sleeping on their boats, all in a bid to make more money during this lucrative period. Prices of all goods soared, and the shrewd made a profit during the festivities. The temples and shrines saw an influx of visitors, adding to the city's bustling atmosphere. Although the sale of human beings was not allowed in Braavos, it boasted the most developed sex and theatre industries. The theatres were packed, and the girls were making substantial earnings. The sewers of various brothels had become nutrient-rich petri dishes. This vibrant scene extended beyond the city to the numerous ports. The large and small sailing ships, adorned in various colors black, white, purple, and green seemed like lace on the land. When they lowered their sails, a forest of bare masts formed. Sailors and passengers moved back and forth on the ships, resembling fat maggots wriggling about from a distance. Some ships had particularly high bows, indicating they had come from Slavers' Bay, while others, bearing family crests, appeared more respectable, suggesting origins in Westeros. The seagull, having finally escaped his first suitor, perched on the mast of a ship, surveying the scene. He noticed a ship with black sails painted with golden skulls, the symbol of the Golden Company, a group of sellswords founded by a bastard son of a Targaryen king. After the founder's death, his head was boiled, plated with gold, and hung on the company's banner, a tradition continued by his successors, creating this unique emblem. A bunch of lunatics, the seagull remarked. He soon saw the banners of several other mercenary companies, such as the Company of the Cat, the Windblown, and the Second Sons. Each large mercenary company had its own ship. Though not always big, they were branded and recognizable. There were 3 reasons why these groups came to Braavos. The first was obvious: they came to have fun. Sellswords, who risked their lives to make money, naturally wanted to partake in the festivities. The second reason was to participate in the tournament. The third was to scout new recruits for their own mercenary groups, based on the performance of competitors in the tournament. Viserys also had such plans. If he could achieve a high ranking, the doors of all the major mercenary groups would open to him. If anyone dared to mention the banquet of the crown, they would fight. These mercenaries were a relatively pure bunch. They didn't care who the recruits were: commoners, nobles, or fugitives. They didn't care about a recruit's lineage or which house they came from. Their business was only one thing: heads. Brothers, can you kill? If so, the mercenary arena awaits. Viserys hadn't yet decided which mercenary group to join, and he had one major concern: Dany. He considered leaving Dany in Braavos with Methys, but there were too many variables. Without him by her side, the risk of assassination attempts on Dany would increase. She was a key part of his plan, and losing her would be catastrophic. He might end up like Igor Rivers. Even if he had to abandon Dany, he couldn't bring himself to do it. In Braavos, he had no one he could trust. Even if House Zalane and the others decided to fight House Frigger, Dany would never be safe. Therefore, he concluded that he would have to join the sellswords with his family. As he pondered all this, the seagull heard a familiar voice in his ear. "Brother! Brother! Wake up! What's wrong with you?" The seagull looked around and realized it was a telepathic message from his main body. He tried to transfer his consciousness back. "Brother! Brother! Lady Kyla! Come quickly!" Dany had remembered that Viserys was in the room, so she wanted to ask him a question. But no matter how hard she knocked, there was no response. Worried, she opened the door and saw Viserys lying on the ground. Her heart dropped. If she lost her brother, she would have nothing left. Her voice grew more urgent as she called out for Kyla. When Kyla saw Viserys collapsed on the ground, she hurried over to check on him. "He's warging. So fast." Kyla was shocked. She had managed to warg into a fish for the first time, but that was more than 3 years after she had first encountered warging. She looked around the room and noticed a basin of water on the table. She approached it and saw the tadpoles swimming inside. "Lady Dany, don't worry, Lord Viserys is in the basin," Kyla exclaimed. Dany blinked in confusion. "I mean his consciousness is in the basin, or rather in the tadpoles," Kyla explained. Dany was still baffled. Kyla, unsure how to make it clearer, shouted into the basin, "Lord Viserys! Lord Viserys! Do you remember what I told you? You have to imagine it. Feel it." She overlooked one critical problem: tadpoles have no hearing. Dany watched Kyla shout at the basin, finding her behavior incomprehensible. Helplessly, she called out to Viserys in her own way, over and over again. "Lady Dany, I have an idea," Kyla said, carrying the basin to Viserys. "What is it?" Dany asked, her face expressionless. Kyla propped up the back of Viserys' head with her knee and opened his mouth. She scooped up a tadpole from the water and put it into his mouth. This. Dany began, watching as the dark, candy-sized object disappeared down Viserys' throat. But after a long time, there was still no reaction. "Lady Dany, let's try pouring water into Lord Viserys' mouth," Kyla suggested. "Will this work?" Dany asked hesitantly. "Let's try it," Kyla urged. Dany, uncertain and out of options, followed Kyla's instructions. Kyla held Viserys' mouth open while Dany prepared to pour the muddy water in. Just then, Viserys' purple pupils returned to focus. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Dany holding a basin, ready to pour water into his mouth. Horrified, Viserys struggled to sit up. "What are you doing?" Dany, overjoyed to see him awake, burst into tears and rushed into his arms. I'm fine," Viserys reassured her, patting her back gently while looking questioningly at Kyla. Kyla, calm and proud, explained, "You must have received a psychic message from the tadpoles. I fed you the tadpoles, and you woke up." "What? Say that again. What did you feed me?" Viserys exclaimed in disbelief. Chapter 53, Constitution 90+. After much effort, Viserys managed to vomit up the tadpole he had swallowed. The tiny creature, which resembled a speck of ink, twitched once before going still. Viserys felt its death instantly. As if sensing something amiss, he opened his panel and immediately saw the issue. Spirit, 99.8. The death of the tadpole, which had paired with him, had cost him 0.2 spirit. Viserys instantly felt his mind wasn't as sharp as before. If a mere tadpole caused a loss of 0.2 spirit, it was no wonder skin changers went mad if they lost their animal companions. If the seagull had died, he might have lost 7 or 8 points of spirit. Fortunately, the seagull had just reached adulthood and should live for a long time. Additionally, as long as they weren't paired for too long, their connection would weaken, and its death would have a lesser impact on him. For now, though, he needed to pair with it frequently for both spying and defense. Viserys quickly realized another problem. Kyla frequently killed her animal companions, even though they were lobsters with almost no intelligence. She had likely lost a lot of spirit as well. Maybe she should practice the Moonsinger songs to recover. Otherwise, her diminishing intelligence might influence Dany. Despite the tadpole incident, Viserys didn't blame Kyla. Instead, he decided to teach Dany how to warg. In both the original novel and the TV series, the dragons she hatched were sometimes disobedient. What if the dragon she hatched in the future was too violent and threw her out of the sky? She was just a little girl. Over the next few days, Viserys began instructing Dany in the art of warging. As the celebration approached, time seemed to fly by. In the blink of an eye, only 3 days remained. Some people, unable to contain their excitement, began wearing masks and parading in the streets. In the early hours of the morning, after practicing the Moonsinger's songs, Viserys knew it was time. He opened his panel to check his constitution data. Constitution, 89.78. Add some points, he thought. With experience from the last time, Viserys prepared a large bathtub. He jumped in and added the general attribute points he had earned to his constitution. Instantly, he felt his heart pounding as if it had taken an aphrodisiac. The blood in his veins raced, thundering in his ears. His normally pale skin began to glow, and the cool water in the tub warmed under the influence of his body temperature. Soon, white steam began to rise from his head. Fortunately, he didn't experience the unpleasant side effects he had before. After nearly an hour, the intense feeling of enhancement gradually faded. In addition to increased strength, Viserys felt significant improvements in his heart and lung function. He immersed himself in the bathtub, holding his breath for 1 minute, then 2, 5. He finally emerged after 25 minutes. This is definitely not my limit, he thought. He guessed he could hold his breath for 40 to 50 minutes and remain active underwater for more than 10 minutes. It was almost unbelievable. When his body broke through to 80, the main improvements were in strength and explosive power. Now, breaking through to 90, the improvements focused on stamina and recovery, broadly referred to as endurance. With super endurance, he could launch fierce attacks on his enemies continuously. In other words, he could use his ultimate move without rest. Viserys looked down at his sculpted muscles and smiled contentedly. Although he had the speed of a fast type, he also possessed the strength of a power type. His tall stature suggested that a weapon like a hammer might suit him best, one blow to silence his enemies. Of course, he could also choose other weapons, such as a halberd, a weapon requiring immense strength and skill, capable of slashing, stabbing, chopping, and smashing. It is invincible, he thought. The next morning, a carriage stopped in front of Viserys' house. It was from House Targaryen, and out stepped Pyrrhina, Methys's personal maid and bodyguard. Without waiting for Viserys to greet her, she walked straight into the living room. "Lady Pyrrhina, are you here to talk about the moon shadow?" Viserys asked. "That's right," Pyrrhina replied with a nod. "My lady instructed me to inform you that all the moon shadows will be delivered this afternoon, and all House Targaryen shops will start selling them." Viserys nodded, understanding that House Targaryen was preparing to compete with House Frigger for the position of Sea Lord. In addition, Pyrrhina continued, "The money you are owed has been deposited in the Iron Bank for you by Lady Targaryen. There are 20,000 gold dragons in total. Here is your account password and information." She handed an envelope to Viserys, sealed with the black lacquer of House Targaryen. "Thank the lady for her generosity," Viserys said. He estimated that the initial wave of sales wouldn't amount to 20,000 gold dragons, so the extra was likely Methys's way of taking care of him and perhaps for Dany's sake. He anticipated that within 3 to 5 years, others would start making soap for profit, potentially impacting his business, but he would be satisfied with earning 100,000 gold dragons. "This is what you deserve. Additionally, my lady hopes you will reconsider participating in the tournament." "What does she mean?" Viserys asked, raising an eyebrow. "First, the House Targaryen doesn't need further explanation, correct?" Viserys nodded. "Second, many sellswords participating in the tournament are looking to take your life." Viserys quickly understood. Many likely had the idea of killing him to claim a reward from Robert. Although Robert hadn't ordered it, this was a rare and legal opportunity. Many sellswords still harbored resentment from the crown banquet and were eager for another chance at him. Viserys smiled. "Thank you, my lady, I will remember your concern. But I will show them what it means to be the reincarnation of El-Ubuleddin." "Who is El-Ubuleddin?" Pyrrhina was puzzled. As the celebration approached, the workshop was also nearing its delivery deadline. However, their raw materials had been destroyed, and they were severely short of manpower. Faced with numerous demands for compensation due to breach of contract, the Morel's family had lost hope. Viserys' soap had been their chance for revival, but the outcome seemed bleak. At this moment, Morel sat tearfully with his son, a small bottle of poison from Lys in front of him, giving his final instructions. "Rabbi, my son, this is my last moment. If I drink this poison, I can buy you some time." With your reputation, you can borrow from the Iron Bank. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, we can pay off the debt. Remember, don't let our family name be disgraced. Father, Rabbi wept bitterly. He thought that if it weren't for the so-called moon shadow, their family and the workshop could still be sold. They might not be rich, but they could at least live comfortably. But now even his father's life was at stake. But who could he blame? Viserys? Himself? House Frigger? Does he even dare? My dear boy, let me look at you one last time, Morel said, reaching out to touch his son's cheek. Just then, a shout came from outside. Master Morel! The moon shadows arrived. Father and son looked at each other in shock and disbelief. Chapter 54, The Sea Lord's Palace. The actions of House Zalane came as a significant surprise to Tormo. The moon shadow, which had remained silent for most of the month, had suddenly made a strong comeback. They had managed to keep a major secret from everyone. There were two key factors in the competition for the position of Sea Lord among the three great houses. The first was the attitude of the current Sea Lord. If he were to support one house over the others, either explicitly or implicitly, the likelihood of that house being elected would increase. The second factor was the opinions of the many merchants in Bravus, which the three families had to consider. Previously, House Frigger had been determined to secure the next Sea Lord position. However, both the current Sea Lord and the merchants had been somewhat aggressive in their attitudes and methods. Now, with House Zalane choosing to stand up and fight, many variables had been introduced. If the Zalane and Antarian families joined forces, it could shift the sentiments of other merchant groups. Tormo, realizing the potential shift in power dynamics, ordered his bodyguard, "Prepare the carriage. I'm going to see that old bastard Roth." Roth was the current leader of House Zalane. Purple Harbor, Bravus, the Sea Lord's Palace. The Sea Lord's Palace, one of Bravus's most iconic landmarks, boasts a design of extraordinary luxury. The entire building is painted a deep sea blue, and about a meter above the ground, the corners are inlaid with shells, conch, and coral. Through the blue gate, the orderly guards stand as a testament to the strictness of the place. As the bastard daughter of Valeria, the palace also incorporates dragon elements. A dragon statue lies at the center of the Sea Lord's palace, but this dragon has a tail as thick as a fish's fin and webbed claws. It is a fusion of dragon and fish, fitting the bastard daughter theme perfectly. The Sea Lord's palace has a lake connected to the outer waterways, where the Sea Lord's sailboat is moored. From bow to stern, blue smiling face masks hang in a long row, resembling a flower skirt that adorns the yacht. On ordinary days, Sea Lord is often on the boat. A middle-aged man with brown eyes and a serious expression walked into the palace. He was the Sea Lord's first sword, Caro Valentin. Handing a small scroll to the Sea Lord, took it and looked at it, a distinct smile spreading across his face, even adding a hint of red to his pale complexion. Caro read the note, and his already shiny forehead, which had receded significantly, seemed to shine even more. "Lord, it seems that all of this is because of that Viserys. I thought that after the coronation banquet, he would be hit hard and might not recover for the rest of his life. I never thought that. This Targaryen is quite something," Farrago said with a smile. In just 6 months, Farrago had heard about Viserys Targaryen 3 times. The first was when Bannergar of the Fierce Fish Company came to him. The second was when he heard about the production of soap. And now, the third time. When the invention of soap first emerged, Farrago thought that House Frigger would definitely be involved. But he never imagined that Viserys would not only remain unafraid but also manage to contact House Zalane. He had even sent someone to find out about Viserys' condition. Since House Frigger came knocking, it seemed Viserys had withdrawn into seclusion. Farrago thought he had given in, but he had actually been planning a big move. But how did he convince House Zalane to help him against House Frigger in just 1 month? Farrago wondered, frowning as he thought it over. Unable to find an answer, he decided to put the matter aside for the time being. As the Sea Lord, he always had the initiative, so he would wait and see what happened. Although Farrago was not in the best of health at the moment, he was confident he would remain the Sea Lord for at least another 6 or 7 years. At that moment, another official entered, carrying a wooden tray adorned with a dozen white shells. "Lord, it's time to choose the topic for the poem." Farrago responded, noting that 3 of the shells had been carefully placed in a more prominent position. His eyes flashed with understanding, but then, as if making a sudden decision, he shuffled the shells like playing a game. After a moment, he picked out 3 and threw them onto the table. He opened the shells to reveal a few words in Valyrian. When Helbo realized that House Frigger didn't seem to care about him, he returned to his own residence. Learning about the dire situation of Morel and his son, he felt proud of his decision to cut ties with Viserys. Compared to their devastation, he had only lost some money. The 1% he had invested in the workshop now seemed like life insurance. Taking a sip of arbor wine, he sighed, "Damn, this wine is really expensive." As the celebration approached, wine prices in Bravos had skyrocketed. Sell swords alone had increased the city's wine consumption by 40%, not to mention the influx of other tourists. What Helbo once drank casually was now a luxury. At least he could still sit and drink. Just then, Helbo's servant entered, carrying a heavy box. "Lord, this is your bonus from the workshop." "What?" Helbo exclaimed, bewildered. "The Morel workshop." The servant nodded. "Yes, Lord. The Morel workshop. But how is this possible?" Helbo took the box, finding it unexpectedly heavy. Opening it, he discovered it was full of gold dragons, at least 400 of them. "How is this possible?" Helbo was stunned. He had visited the workshop, seen the workers fleeing, the raw materials gone, and the Morel father and son facing ruin. How did they deliver the goods? "I heard that the House Zalane's carriage brought the Moonshadows to the workshop. After that, I don't know much more," the servant admitted, puzzled. "Zalane, Zalane, Zalane." Helbo muttered agitatedly, repeating the name. Could it be Viserys? How could he, this? A figure quickly formed in his mind, but he didn't want to believe it. Yet, the gold dragons before him were undeniable. If Viserys had indeed secured the support of House Zalane, the production of soap would remain unaffected, and Helbo should have been profiting from dividends. Realizing he hadn't just lost a few gold dragons but potentially thousands, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Hurry up and prepare a carriage for me. I'm going to see Lord Viserys." Chapter 55, Heart Rain. When Helbo rushed to Viserys' residence, he could only see Dany practicing swordsmanship on the lawn through the gate. As he attempted to get her attention, a voice from behind startled him. The voice was gloomy and cold, sending a shiver down his spine. "Lady Kyla. I'm here to visit Lord Viserys." "Lord Viserys is not here. What is your business?" Kyla replied. As Dany's personal bodyguard, Viserys had instructed her to be cautious of Helbo, so her expression was wary and cold. Helbo's heart sank a little. "Well, it's nothing important. I just wanted to pay a simple visit," he said with a forced smile. "Lord Viserys has gone out." "Oh? Where?" Helbo inquired. Kyla's cold stare remained fixed on him, offering no response. Realizing his rudeness, Helbo quickly apologized. "When will Lord Viserys be back?" "I don't know." Faced with Kyla's frosty demeanor, Helbo felt a chill of dread. He had underestimated Viserys too many times. First, he thought Viserys wouldn't escape the Fierce Fish Company, only for Viserys to earn the moniker Fierce Fish Eater. Then he dismissed Viserys' soap venture, which turned into a huge success. Finally, he believed Viserys had doomed himself by offending House Frigger, only to see him align with House Zalane. The faint spark of goodwill between Helbo and Viserys had been completely extinguished, but he still felt compelled to try once more. He took a small box from his pocket and handed it to Kyla. "This is a small gift for Lord Viserys. Please give it to him." Kyla opened the box, revealing a black dragon bone ring set with a ruby. "That's fine. If there's nothing else, you can go now." "Oh, okay." Helbo returned to his carriage, dejected that he hadn't seen Viserys. As the coachman prepared to leave, Helbo suddenly said, "Take the carriage to the locust tree in front. I'll be waiting there today." "Yes, Lord. That'll be 3 gold dragons." "3 gold dragons? Are your horse's hooves made of gold, or are the wheels made of gold?" Lord, you have to consider the time. If it were any other day, I wouldn't dare ask you for 3 gold dragons." "Okay, okay. 3 gold dragons it is." Helbo reluctantly handed over the 3 gold dragons. He was determined to wait there until Viserys returned. At this time, Viserys was on Falaya's ship, learning about the poetry competition. This competition was not as he had originally understood. It was more like a variety show, with contestants taking turns on stage and judges offering their evaluations. Poets and singers would submit their own songs, which would then be performed by the singers and musicians of the Sea Lord's palace. During the competition, musicians and singers would be spread throughout Bravus, with the highest concentration near the Titan of Bravus. The judging criteria were based on the number of performances each piece received, with votes cast by anyone willing to pay. If a song garnered enough performances, it advanced to the next round, otherwise, it was eliminated. Essentially, it functioned like a recommendation mechanism, ensuring fairness even if someone wanted to spend a lot of money to support a contestant. The 10-day festival's 3 competitions were interspersed throughout the schedule. The general arrangement was: song, competition, competition, song, competition, competition, song, competition, competition, celebration. In other words, except for the first round's theme, which will be given a day in advance, the other 2 rounds will be announced the night before. Viserys asked. That's right. Bravus wants to see better works on the first day, so they provide more time, Phalia patiently explained. Asha watched Brother Viserys intently. Actually, I still suggest you give up, Lord Viserys. Participating in 2 competitions at the same time will be very tiring, Phalia advised. Viserys smiled crookedly. Lady Moonshadow, don't worry. The first round's topic is the sea, right? I think I've already written it. Already? Phalia was skeptical. She had just told Viserys the topic less than 20 minutes ago. Choosing her words carefully, she said, Master Viserys, if your song is too similar to existing songs, you may be disqualified. She almost said plagiarism. Viserys pointed to the harp hanging on the wall. I'll play a song for you to hear. Okay, Phalia nodded, but Asha didn't move to get it. Asha. Hey. Asha, lost in thought while staring at Viserys, quickly recovered. Oh, okay. Realizing her distraction, she blushed and handed the harp to Viserys. Viserys examined the harp, noting its resemblance to a guitar or ukulele. Plucked instruments were familiar to him, he had practiced extensively while chasing girls in school. As he tuned the instrument, Phalia and Asha watched with anticipation. I'm going to start now. Okay. Viserys took a moment to compose himself, then began to play the prelude. The sound evoked images of a vast sea and sky, with lingering notes suggesting a story about to unfold. Music, XNY/Heart Rain by Jackie Chung, Zhang Suihu, and Surui. Bitter sand. The feeling of pain blowing against the face. Like a father's scolding. A mother's crying, forever unforgettable. As Viserys played and sang, the 2 girls began to envision a young man running along the beach. He was filled with longing and hope for the future, but he also faced the harsh blows of reality. At a crucial moment, a determined sailor with a strong physique encouraged him to keep going. Bolstered by the sailor's encouragement, the young man set sail on the winds of life. However, he inevitably lost his way on the sea of existence. The sailor then reappeared to guide him back on course. Viserys' voice and the melody of the song naturally spread beyond the cabin. Although Josian, patrolling the lake at a distance, couldn't hear the lyrics, the tune reached his ears, invigorating his men. Some of the more sensitive guards even found tears welling up in their eyes. You are worthy of Lady Moonshadow, Josian thought with emotion. But then, noticing Viserys' satire, he wondered if the song was his own creation. No way. Absolutely not. Josian quickly dismissed the thought. When Viserys finished his song, Phalia and Asha had a different look in their eyes. The guarded walls around their hearts had loosened considerably. As they gazed at Viserys' warm smile, they couldn't help but think that spending a night with such a man might be a very good idea. Chapter 56, Company of the Cat. In the afternoon, Viserys left Phalia's ship. Asha stood on the bow, watching him depart for a long time until the silver-white figure disappeared from view. You seem to have a good impression of Viserys, Phalia said teasingly. Yes, it would be nice to marry a man like him, Asha replied straightforwardly, making Phalia pause. She remembered that Asha had Dothraki blood. I want to lie with him on the great grass sea, Asha continued, her excitement growing. Him riding on top of me or me riding on top of him, under the stars, in the morning light, in the setting Sunday. Her cheeks flushed as she spoke, her enthusiasm bordering on madness. Okay, stop, Phalia interrupted, though the vivid scene had already formed in her mind. The Dothraki worship the sky and believe that all important and sacred things should be done under its presence, whether it is birth or death. They also see reproduction as a sacred act. To be united with one's loved one under the open sky is a wonderful and happy thing. Recently, Viserys had been able to switch his consciousness quickly between his body and his animal familiar, a skill honed through relentless practice. It now took no more than 2 seconds. His warging was more pronounced, enabling him to return instantly if something happened to his body. No longer did he worry about being stuck with a mouthful of tadpoles. The sun was setting, and dusk was approaching, but there was still enough light. Once he was in the carriage, Viserys transferred his consciousness to the seagull. The seagull flapped its wings and, after about 10 minutes, he spotted their home. He began to descend, noticing 3 carriages parked in front of the house and a crowd of people pushing and shoving. Viserys' seagull had a bad feeling, so he accelerated and landed on the roof of one of the carriages. He quickly recognized a few familiar faces among the crowd, including Morel, his son Regis, and Helbo. Their presence wasn't surprising, it was likely a matter of gratitude and flattery. However, something seemed off about the situation. Helbo and the Morels were standing at the gate, trying to prevent another group from entering. This group consisted of 5 or 6 rough-looking individuals with brutal faces and equally rude behavior. "You can't go in," Morel insisted. "I heard this is the home of the Beggar King." "We're just here to visit," retorted the yellow-bearded leader, trying to force his way in. "But Lord Viserys isn't home," Regis interjected. "It's okay, we can wait. Besides, how can you make guests wait outside?" The leader pushed forward, but Regis and Morel blocked him. Viserys' seagull flew up to get a better view inside the house. He saw Dany leading Kyla out. Several members of the rough-looking group noticed Dany, and their expressions shifted from surprise to greed. "My lords, my brother is not at home. If you have any business, you can speak to him when he returns," Dany said firmly. The yellow-bearded man sneered, "Oh. This is the Beggar King's sister, Dany, right? If your brother isn't here, you can come with us. Our captain will treat you as a VIP." Dany felt a wave of nausea at his lecherous expression. This yellow-bearded man was from the mercenary group called the Company of the Cat. Their captain, Bloodbeard, was notorious for his cruelty and bloodlust. Few knew his real name. He despised peace, reveled in war, and had a notorious appetite for beautiful women, good wine, and banquets. Bloodbeard had just arrived in Bravos when House Frigger approached him with an offer, caused trouble for Viserys in exchange for a handsome sum. The opportunity to indulge his vices while getting paid was too tempting. He assumed that Dany, as a princess, would be a prize, so he sent his men to find her. The laws of Bravos forbade human trafficking, but Bloodbeard and his men saw this as an invitation, not an abduction. With House Frigger backing them, they could always flee if things became difficult. Moreover, Robert Baratheon was offering a reward for the capture of Viserys and his sister. They planned to take Dany by force under the guise of an invitation, hoping to lure Viserys out of hiding. "Sorry, but if there is an invitation, you will have to wait until my brother returns," Dany said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Ha, that won't work. Our captain doesn't like men," the yellow-bearded man retorted, his companions laughing heartily behind him. "Get out of my way. Do you want to die stopping the Company of the Cat?" Yellowbeard threatened, his tone menacing. Helbo hesitated, his urge to retreat growing strong. He was part of a vibrant social group at best, while Yellowbeard and his men were hardened criminals who lived by the sword. But then he thought of this as his chance to repair his relationship with Viserys. Despite his fear, he stood his ground. Unlike Helbo, the Morel and his son were resolute. They knew that without Viserys, they would have been long dead. They owed him a debt of gratitude, and now was the time to repay it. "Get rid of these meddlers," Yellowbeard ordered. He had brought the best fighters with him, and Helbo and the others were no match. They couldn't use weapons, but their fists were just as deadly. In a matter of moments, they had knocked most of the defenders to the ground. Only Regis, who had learned a few moves from Viserys, managed to put up a fight, but he was soon overwhelmed as his companions were quickly beaten down. Realizing the danger, Kyla tried to drag Dany away. "Don't let them get away!" Yellowbeard shouted. He and his men began slamming against the wooden gate, which groaned under the impact and would likely not hold for long. Viserys regained consciousness and quickly assessed the situation. He pulled out a few gold dragons, leaned out of the carriage, and waved them in the driver's face. "Run as fast as you can. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Go." The driver, feeling the heavy weight of the coins, raised his whip high. The carriage suddenly accelerated, causing the ride to become more violent as pedestrians scrambled to get out of the way. "Company of the cat, I'll deal with you first," Viserys muttered, a flame of anger blazing in his eyes. His heart pounded with adrenaline. Today, he wouldn't rest until he had smashed a few heads. Chapter 57, Kyla, use your head. Kyla is merely an assassin, not suited for frontal combat, much less protecting Dany. As the gate threatened to break under the attacker's pressure, she swiftly took Dany upstairs and locked the door. "Kyla, use your head. You need to climb over the wall." Viserys' seagull squawked in frustration at Kyla's futile efforts. A loud crash followed. The iron gate gave way, and Yellowbeard approached the front door with his men, shouting, "Prince Dany! We have prepared a carriage for you. Come with us. Our captain is waiting for you." Viserys' seagull, perched on the wall, mused that a parrot might be a better companion next time. Still, he was relieved when Dany calmly retrieved her crossbow and a poisoned arrow from under her bed. No longer just a simple wooden arrow, it now had an iron tip. Seeing this, Viserys' seagull sighed in relief, almost smiling like a human. The child has grown up, he thought. Dany calmly leaned out of the window and aimed at the mercenaries below. "Haha, it seems Prince Dany is a bit impatient," Yellowbeard taunted, but was silenced by the swish of the crossbow. He felt a foreign object in his throat and, clutching at it, realized a bolt had pierced his neck through his fluffy beard. "Well done," Viserys' seagull thought, wanting to give Dany a thumbs up. As Yellowbeard fell, the remaining mercenaries sought cover. However, Dany and Kyla were relentless, leaving only 2 mercenaries standing, one wounded in the leg. "We're leaving. Don't shoot," one of the mercenaries shouted, shocked by the little girl's composure. Outside, Morell and his son were equally stunned. Dany was no longer the shy girl she had been. Helbo, who hadn't seen Dany for over a month, was also surprised by her transformation. But the most satisfied was Viserys. The time he had invested in training her had paid off. Although Dany wasn't a natural killer like Kyla, she had grown much stronger through her training. Viserys' goal was never to make her a killer or assassin, but to sharpen her mind. After a while, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from outside. A group of Bravos guards entered the courtyard. After the onlookers and Helbo recounted the events, the Yellowbeard men were arrested. Just as they were about to leave, Viserys' carriage arrived. He jumped out and addressed the only still conscious mercenary, "Tell your captain that Viserys Targaryen is waiting for him in the swordsmanship competition. Tell him to send every one of you, and I will kill you one by one." He then held up a finger and mimed slitting his throat. The mercenary shuddered, as if his head were truly about to be cut off. The guards, understanding the situation and knowing that House Zalane supported Dany, did not make things difficult for her. After a brief discussion, the matter was settled. The injured Helbo and Morell were carried home by Viserys. Seeing the harmonious relationship between Viserys and Morell, Helbo felt a twinge of envy, hoping it would soon be his turn. However, Viserys did not immediately talk to him. Instead, he turned to Regis and asked, "How are you? Is it serious?" "I'm fine. Lord Viserys, I'm very strong," Regis replied, showing his resilience. Despite several bruises, he appeared unfazed. "Now it's my turn, right?" Helbo, sitting on the sofa, looked on with longing, even stretching his neck a little. But Viserys still didn't seem to want to talk to him. "Thanks to everyone, we were able to keep the bandits out. I thank you all on behalf of my sister," Viserys said, bowing to the group. Although injured, they struggled to return the bow. Meanwhile, Helbo's heart sank. "If you ever need help in the future, my son and I will do our best to assist you," Morell said to Viserys. Both he and his son were genuinely puzzled about how Viserys had managed to connect with House Zalane. Viserys, however, saw them as useful allies, willing to let them assist him a reward in itself. With House Zalane's protection, Morell and his son could face any future challenges with more confidence, even if they lost their soap business. "I don't think you'll need my help anymore," Viserys remarked, piquing everyone's curiosity. "After the celebration, I plan to join the sellswords," he announced. "Why is that?" Helbo interjected, unwilling to give up. "It's easy to live as a wealthy man, but Robert and Tywin have the blood of my closest relatives on their hands. As the last male heir of the Targaryens, I can't let this go." Viserys' tone grew cold, reminding everyone that they were in the presence of a prince who had lost his kingdom. The atmosphere turned solemn. Helbo realized that, to Viserys, even the three great houses of Bravos seemed insignificant. "If you want to join the mercenaries, let us make you a suit of armor as a gift from us," Morel offered, knowing the high cost of plate armor, which could easily reach several hundred gold dragons. "Thank you, Master Morel, but just find me a good blacksmith. I have a special weapon in mind," Viserys replied. As the evening drew to a close, Morel and his son departed, leaving only Helbo, who was determined to speak with Viserys tonight. He would not leave until he was dismissed. "Ah, Helbo, we've known each other for a long time, and I have something to tell you," Viserys finally addressed him. Helbo's heart leapt with joy, his entire being filled with excitement. "This is music to my ears," he thought. Chapter 58, The Customs of the Dothraki. "Don't worry, Lord Viserys, I'll take care of it," Helbo assured him. "Yes, be careful on the road," Viserys replied, waving as he fiddled with the black dragon bone ring on his hand. Viserys had tasked Helbo with ensuring that the bards performing at the celebration would not be disturbed, a precaution based on past incidents. However, Viserys didn't entirely rely on Helbo. Someone from House Zalane would be the main enforcer to guarantee everything went smoothly. Helbo, despite being somewhat of a weak-willed opportunist, had not caused any trouble, and there was no need to make an enemy out of him for now. Viserys glanced again at the ring on his finger. He had to admit, the black dragon bone matched his aesthetic perfectly and looked quite imposing. Though the ring only provided a small benefit of 0.01 assignable points per day, he still valued it. After all, 10 days would yield 0.1 points. "I should get a dragon bone necklace, dragon bone belt, dragon bone bracelet, and maybe even a dragon bone anklet," he mused. "Looks like I'll need a jewelry box. As the saying goes, good news never travels far, but bad news travels 1,000 miles. The news that Bloodbeard's men had been defeated by a little girl quickly spread throughout the sellsword community, eliciting public ridicule and mockery from various mercenary groups. They deemed such a sellsword unworthy of existence. "Haha, when we get back, we'll definitely tell the captain about this. He'll be so happy," laughed a mercenary from the Windblown, known as Maris, the Pretty Maris. Despite her moniker, Maris was anything but beautiful. Her nose looked torn apart, and her face was a mosaic of scars, evidence of a hard life. Her tall frame and golden hair were her only redeeming features. She was accompanied by a man with grey hair, half a head shorter than her, trailing her every step. "What? This thing costs 20 gold dragons!" Maris exclaimed, wincing at the price of the palm-sized soap in her hand. After some hesitation, she decided to buy it. The Golden Company, one of the most formidable mercenary groups with over 8,000 cavalry, also caught wind of the news. "This one's a Targaryen, too. Should we ask him if he wants to join?" inquired a sellsword with flaxen hair and strikingly green eyes. They had heard some rumors about Viserys before arriving in Bravos. From a martial perspective, he seemed competent, and considering their first captain, Igor, the recruiter was intrigued. "Isn't there a swordsmanship competition? We'll see about that. Besides, he's only 15, right? He's too young," another member remarked. Meanwhile, in the Cattery, a man with blue hair and under 30 years old, Dario, the vice-captain of the Stormcrows, heard the news while applying his makeup. Dario, who in the original plot had been seduced by the mother of Dragon's beauty and turned traitor, found the situation amusing but not serious. "I heard that the Beggar King's sister is very beautiful. Are you not interested?" one of his subordinates asked. "Don't the Targaryens favor brother-sister marriages? Maybe the Beggar King keeps his sister very close." Dario mused, a slight smile playing on his lips. If he had the chance, he wouldn't mind seeing how beautiful the princess of a fallen royalty was. If she was truly stunning, it wouldn't be too late to consider taking her. The big celebration started the next day, but many people flocked to the Titan of Bravos the night before to secure a good spot. They slept directly on the banks of the waterway using blankets or pieces of cloth, creating a spectacular sight from the air. The rich, however, were in a much better situation. They had beds to sleep in, hot food to eat, and servants to set up tents for them. Some of the Dothraki enjoyed the open-air environment, taking advantage of the night to engage in their customary practices. Perched in a tree, Viserys Seagull observed the live broadcast, marveling at the Dothraki's creativity and the difficulty of their moves. "Dany, sleeping in the carriage and chatting with Kyla, wondered why Viserys had suddenly decided to set up his tent. As dawn broke, everyone donned elaborate masks. These masks covered only the upper half of the face, leaving the mouth and nose exposed. The poor wore simple, crudely painted masks, while the rich flaunted masks made from a wider choice of materials, adorned with bright, expensive paints, feathers, and even gold and silver. Overnight, the lords of Bravos lost their dignity and decency in the revelry. Viserys, his sister, and Kyla began packing early to better conceal their identities. Dany and Viserys wore hats to hide their silver hair. Dany chose a silver mask, while Viserys opted for an unusually ugly black leather mask attached to his hat, which looked very uncomfortable. When asked why, Viserys had only one explanation: it was black. Their carriage was parked on a high vantage point, offering a splendid view. In the early morning, ships from the Sea Lord's palace had already appeared, clearing the waterway of boats. The rising sun cast a golden hue on the water, while the clear blue sky seemed to invite the gods to join in the celebration with the mortals. Everyone eagerly awaited the arrival of the Sea Lord's yacht. Suddenly, a long horn sounded in the distance. The crowd craned their necks, their excitement palpable. As the horn grew louder, a yacht adorned with smiling faces from bow to stern came into view, bathed in a radiant light. "Oh, the Sea Lord, the Sea Lord!" The people's shouts nearly drowned out the horn. As the boat drew closer, the figure standing on the bow became increasingly visible. Draped in a blue silk cloak that shimmered like water, he held a 2-foot-long dragon-bone scepter topped with a large diamond, the source of the boat's glow. Sea Lord Farrago smiled and waved to the cheering crowds on either side of the waterway. Behind him stood 6 imposing guards, their chainmail glinting under their clothes, ready to protect him from any threat. Following the Sea Lord's boat were several flower boats, brimming with blossoms. People on board continuously threw petals into the water, the throwers themselves scantily clad and strikingly attractive. Their fair skin glistened in the sunlight, eliciting roars from some of the more spirited onlookers. Dany noticed her brother Viserys watching with particular interest. Following his gaze, she saw several pairs of leaping rabbits. "Finally!" Viserys muttered. In the distance, 2 ships brimming with guards escorted the official ship, protecting something precious, a shining Valyrian steel sword and a green dragon egg. Chapter 59, The Bear. Apart from the dragon egg before them, Viserys and Dany had only seen one other at House Targaryen. According to their knowledge, Illyrio possesses 3 or more, the Sea Lord reportedly has 3, and House Frigger might also have 1. Euron claims he once had a dragon egg, but it's thought he used it to pay the faceless men to assassinate his brother, King Balon. The Iron Bank, known for safeguarding not just currency but also precious items, might also have dragon eggs. Other free cities could have them as well. After the fall of Valyria, a few dragon lords remained in the free cities, but they and their dragons were eventually killed by locals. The Dothraki, who raid far and wide, might possess a dragon egg, though the probability is low. Viserys' goal is to collect at least 5 dragon eggs before the appearance of the Red Comet. This egg, plus Illyrio's 3 and 1 from House Targaryen, forms his baseline goal. As long as he can find a way to raise the 5 dragons, he will have passed the level. However, once the dragons hatch, he will become a beacon in the night, drawing the attention of all forces. "Let's get the dragon eggs first," Viserys decided, shifting his focus to the sword. The sword, seemingly a 2-handed weapon, would not be easy to obtain. Even if he won the championship in swordsmanship, there would be significant hurdles. If all else failed, he could ask for cash instead, as the price of a claymore could arm 100 men. After all, it was a claymore, not a laser sword. Following the ships carrying the dragon eggs and claymores were the courtesans' vessels. One ship, surrounded by flying birds, appeared to belong to the Nightingale, Gortave. Another ship had numerous soap bubbles reflecting a dreamlike luster in the sunlight, clearly Phalia's vessel. The enchanting bubbles overshadowed the magic of the bird-laden ship, capturing the interest of the shore's spectators. "It's so beautiful. How long does it take to make this? It's so beautiful." To some, Phalia's boat seemed to be burning with gold. Despite the beauty of other boats, including those of Phalia and Gortave, none could match the splendor of Phalia's display. Even the boat of the poetess from House Targaryen, which appeared first, was overshadowed. Yet, she remained unfazed. Farrago didn't expect her to win the entire beauty contest, and she herself was indifferent. With the Sea Lord's support, winning or losing didn't matter. In stark contrast, Gortave had high hopes for her boat adorned with beautiful birds. She believed it would captivate everyone, but the soap bubbles stole the show. I heard these were made by the Beggar King, Viserys, Gortave's maid, Betha, remarked. Betha, a bed slave from Yunkai, bore a striking resemblance to Gortave. Both had dark red hair, differing only in brightness, making them nearly indistinguishable in dim light. This similarity was why Gortave chose her as a stand-in. I remember you saying that Viserys is also participating in the swordsmanship tournament. Gortave asked. Yes, Betha confirmed. Tomorrow, you'll take my place, and Kethmo and I will go see this Beggar King. Okay, I'll inform Kethmo, Betha replied. Kethmo, Gortave's loyal bodyguard, was known for his fierce loyalty. It was said he once killed a sailor who claimed his wife was more beautiful than Nightingale. Gortave had meticulously trained Kethmo to be her devoted protector. Once, Gortave had Betha dress in her clothes and seduce a Bravasi official while keeping Kethmo on the ship. She instructed Betha to scream as loudly as possible. Just as Kethmo was about to break, Gortave appeared before him, and he felt as if his soul had been saved. Betha spent the night as Gortave's double, while Gortave and Kethmo spent the night counting the stars. Gortave even pretended to fall asleep in his arms, but Kethmo did nothing. As the courtesans' boats passed, they were followed by vessels carrying musicians and singers. These boats were spaced apart to prevent their music from clashing. The long procession took almost half an hour to pass, with the rich riding in carriages and ordinary people walking. Illyrio, the great merchant, had naturally arranged for a carriage. He was irritated when Varys informed him that Viserys was bluffing. He realized he had been outwitted by a clever fox but kept this to himself, as his relationship with Varys was a secret. Illyrio suspected Viserys had other sources and wasn't just fabricating his information. Varys might have been a front. From Illyrio's perspective, Viserys believed he had fooled him, but Illyrio could reverse the deception, making Viserys think he had succeeded. This strategy might yield something useful. Additionally, Illyrio wanted the Lannisters to continue providing cover for his bastards and diverting Robert's attention. That's why he didn't freeze the account he had given to Viserys, even after confirming the news with Varys. However, Viserys was also a master of deception. Illyrio knew that even if he pretended ignorance, Viserys would be aware that he knew. Through this intrigue, Illyrio learned about the soap and House Zalane. Besides meeting Viserys, he intended to discuss the soap with House Zalane. At this time, the Titan of Bravos was bustling with activity. Snacks, toys, acrobats, and minstrels filled the streets, creating a lively atmosphere. For safety reasons, Viserys did not allow Dany to get out of the carriage to play, instead, they remained inside. If they wanted to buy something along the way, they would send Regis, who was following them, to make the purchase. Regis, now acting as Viserys' eyes and ears, was keeping an eye on Kyla. Viserys was curious about who Kyla's contact would be. As Kyla met with the man, Regis realized it was indeed someone from West Eros, and more specifically, from the north. When the man introduced himself, Regis was completely taken aback. "I am Yoram Mormont of Bear Island," the man said, "and I will be working with you to assassinate Viserys Targaryen and Daenerys Targaryen." Chapter 60, Yoram Mormont. Ho! The bear. Viserys Seagull scratched his head with his claws, quickly recalling the storyline involving Yoram Mormont, the bear. In the original tale, he met the siblings at Dany's wedding to the Horse Lord. Despite being captivated by Dany's beauty, he chose to spy for King's Landing, constantly feeding them information about the Viserys siblings. Later, as he fell in love with Dany, he became entirely devoted to her. Before that, he had been serving the Second Sons. What's going on? Why is he now a spy for King's Landing? And why is he plotting with Kyla to assassinate Dany and me? Viserys Seagull pondered intensely. In the original plot, if Viserys hadn't traveled back in time, he would have fled Bravos 6 months earlier, warned by dragon dreams. It would have been difficult for King's Landing to locate the siblings, which is why they met by chance at Dany's wedding. But because Viserys had traveled back in time, he not only failed to escape Bravos but also caused quite a stir, attracting King's Landing's attention. Dany, also in the Free Cities, heard about it. Perhaps, like in the original storyline, Yora sought amnesty by providing information to King's Landing, leading him to Bravos. From his perch, Viserys Seagull listened intently as Yora and Kyla discussed their assassination plan. "I've already approached Viserys as a maid, but he's too vigilant, and I haven't had a chance to strike," Kyla reported. What about poisoning? Yora asked. No, he keeps a dog and always lets the dog eat first, Kyla replied. Lying is a necessary skill for an assassin. Yora scratched his eyebrows, sensing Viserys' excessive caution. I heard he's good at martial arts. Yora asked. Yes, far better than the average person, Kyla confirmed. How can this be? Yora was perplexed, unable to understand the source of Viserys' martial prowess. Kyla and Viserys Seagull observed Yora silently, curious about his next move. Well, isn't he going to participate in the swordsmanship competition? Let's assess his strength there, Yora decided. Very well, my lord. I'll wait for your news, Kyla replied. Yora nodded. Since leaving Bear Island, no one had called him my lord. Before departing, he glanced at Viserys Seagull on the wall, but saw nothing suspicious. My lord, what should we do now? Kyla turned to Viserys Seagull and asked. Viserys Seagull stared back in silence, unable to speak. Kyla, realizing her mistake, apologized. I'm sorry, my lord, I forgot that you can't speak right now. Rolling his eyes, Viserys Seagull took flight and soared away. He flew around and found more than a dozen wandering singers and bards playing sailor. However, most of these performers were on the fringes of the festival, while the center was dominated by the Nightingale's musicians. Suddenly Viserys Seagull heard a dispute in the distance and flew over to investigate. He saw two groups of people in conflict, pushing and shoving each other. Listen to Sailor. We were here first. No, listen to Purple Wave. We were here first. It seemed Purple Wave was a song from the Nightingale's side. You sing Purple Waves for a day, and I'll give you 20 gold dragons. One man shouted. I'll give 30. Sing Sailor. Another countered. In the end, the group wanting to hear Purple Waves won out, being more numerous and able to pay more. However, Viserys Seagull noticed there were still plenty of people who preferred Sailor. As time passed, the trend moved not only towards the outer areas but also towards the center of the festival. With 2 more days to go, Sailor seemed to be gaining popularity. He then flew towards the 3 houses that had gathered near the Titan of Bravus. These houses owned property in the area and thus had secured good spots. To his surprise, he saw Tormo Frigger and Roth Zalane sitting together, chatting happily. This is my house Frigger's mead. Would you like to try some? Tormo offered. No, thanks. I brought tea from the Reach, Roth replied. Without needing to ask, Roth's servant poured him a cup of tea. What Roth didn't realize was that House Frigger's preference for sweet wine meant they had the lowest level of lead poisoning among the 3 houses. However, Roth had switched to tea made with water straight from the Long Canal, so he didn't have to worry. When Tormo learned that Methys had filled the soap vacancy, he immediately approached House Zalane. The conversation did not go well. Tormo assumed Viserys had offered significant benefits or value to win House Zalane's loyalty. But now, it seemed House Zalane was willing to go to war with him for the survival of their lineage. Could Viserys have solved the problem of House Zalane not having a healthy child for nearly 20 years? Tormo couldn't fathom how a young kid could have such abilities, nor why Roth and his wife believed in him. It would take at least a dozen years to verify any solution. Haha, that's right. Lord Roth has a broad perspective, but I wonder if the swordsman you've chosen shares your business acumen. Tormo Frigger quipped. Over the years, House Zalane had declined due to a lack of a successor. With fewer people willing to join them, attracting good swordsmen was a challenge. When I do business, I don't like to cast a wide net. When I find potential, I invest heavily, Roth replied, taking a sip of his tea. Viserys is the one I'm investing in. I'm afraid that investment will be lost, Tormo retorted. I'm the opposite of you. I invest in anything immediately profitable, turning small gains into large ones. Their argument about business experience was subtle, a confrontation without raised voices. Listen, Roth said, cupping his hand to his ear. This sailor song is quite good. My sailors love it. Oh? Really? But I clearly hear Purple Waves louder, Tormo countered. Roth, recognizing Tormo's ploy, smiled. Lord Tormo, perhaps you've been in your own bird garden too long. I suggest you venture out and listen to different sounds. A philosopher once said, to only listen to what you want to hear is to deceive yourself. Interesting, but as long as I am strong enough, the world will only make the sounds I want to hear, Tormo replied confidently. The two men were locked in a battle of wits, neither willing to concede. As their debate reached a stalemate, a white shadow slipped away. Tomorrow marked the second day of the 10-day festival and the first day of the swordsmanship tournament. Viserys pondered whether he should showcase his skills to intimidate Yora or feign weakness to give him false confidence.
Thanks for listening.